Chapter 22-28. What's down there? Zhang Tianyi asked. It's supposed to be a mirror image of Theodosius I's mausoleum. Wenda's tone was also not very sure. Just a mirror image of the mausoleum? At least what I know is just a mirror image, Wenda said. Is there anything else? I don't know. Zhang Tianyi explored the surroundings. There were obvious signs of activity here. Did you arrange a soul stone here? Zhang Tianyi asked. Since there were signs of activity, it was very likely that the participants of the Holy Glory battle were attracted by the soul stone. Zhang Tianyi looked suspiciously at Wendy. Wendy rubbed his chin and replied, Some of the soul essence stones in the Wasteland's Central Division were arranged by my disciple, Nancy. I don't remember arranging any soul essence stones here. Is he in the Wasteland now? Yes. Call him over, Zhang Tianyi said. Wendy took out his communicator. Hey Nancy, where are you now? Teacher, I'm in the central building, monitoring the overall situation. I'm in Theodosius I's mausoleum. Come to me, I have something to ask you. Okay, teacher, please wait a moment, I'll be there soon. Zhang Tianyi and Wendy waited for a long time, but AI Nancy did not come. It seems that your disciple has a serious procrastination problem, Zhang Tianyi said with a somewhat sarcastic tone. Even if AI Nancy did not have the speed of the two of them, it was impossible that 3 hours had passed. Unless he was unwilling to come, or something happened on the way. Wendy took out his communicator again, but this time there was no answer from the other end. Wendy's face suddenly became gloomy. No one liked to be stood up, and Wendy did not like it. I hope AI Nancy will give me a reasonable explanation later. Wendy and Zhang Tianyi returned to the central building. However, when Wendy returned to his laboratory, he found that his laboratory was completely destroyed. Many valuable materials could not be found, and all kinds of important instruments were destroyed. And AI Nancy was nowhere to be seen. AI Nancy! Wendy growled. His face was like a storm under the hot sun. Are you sure this was done by AI Nancy? Zhang Tianyi asked. You mean someone broke in here? You even kidnapped Nancy? Hee hee. Of course it's him. Do you even need to think about it? Besides him, who else could enter your laboratory? Other than him, who knows where your important materials and instruments are kept? Apart from him, who else could clean up their traces so thoroughly? I don't think he betrayed you on the spur of the moment, Zhang Tianyi said wickedly. When Wendy heard Zhang Tianyi's words, at first, he really thought that he had misunderstood AI Nancy. In the end, Zhang Tianyi's words directly pierced his heart. There was no doubt that AI Nancy had a motive for deliberately staying by his side. When you called him to the mausoleum, he already knew he couldn't hide it anymore, so before he left, he set you up. If I catch that guy, I'll soak his brain in formalin so that he'll never die. Congratulations, Nancy. You finally don't have to endure that boring life anymore. Welcome back to the big family. AI Nancy glanced at the people who came to greet her. Compared to the troubles that will follow, my return is nothing to be happy about. Soon, Wendy will find me, and even you. Then I will bear all his anger with you. Everyone's joyful smiles suddenly turned serious. Did you get everything? A spirit body emerged from the crowd. This spirit body was a soul that was covered in darkness and abstruse. We got it. What about your side? One of the formation eyes has been opened. This is faster than we expected. Who opened it? AI Nancy asked in surprise. I don't know. What was opened was the mausoleum of Theodosius I, our biggest headache. AI Nancy was even more shocked. How is that possible? Could it be Celestial Master Zhang? You guys successfully schemed against Celestial Master Zhang? Lured him into the mausoleum of Theodosius I. Because each of them had a different division of labor, AI Nancy was responsible for lurking around Wendy. Then, she could get first-hand information from Wendy. Therefore, she didn't know the specific tasks and progress of her other companions. But at this moment, she suddenly heard that the hidden formation eye of Theodosius I's mausoleum had been destroyed. After all, The hidden formation eye of Theodosius I's mausoleum was guarded by Theodosius, an emperor blessed by God. Unless it was one of the top existences in the spiritual world, it was almost impossible to defeat the guardian Theodosius. Now that she heard that the formation eye had been opened, the first person that Ai Nancy thought of was Zhang Tianyi. Although their original plan was to trick Zhang Tianyi and let him inadvertently help open the formation eye. But at this moment, thinking of Zhang Tianyi's rage, that and an angry Wen De were two different things. Wen De was known as the world's #1 alchemist. But his combat power was far from the top. It could only be regarded as not bad. But Zhang Tianyi was different. He was even known in some areas as the human closest to God, or the only God that existed in the world. Even if Zhang Tianyi was not a real God, he also had his own believers and admirers. We didn't have time to arrange it. As a result, the formation eye was opened. We don't know the specific situation. Ai Nancy pondered for a while. Although they were companions, they were still a little wary of each other. So she didn't completely trust her companion's words. Especially in combination with the previous conversation between Wen De and her, it was revealed that Wen De and Zhang Tianyi already knew about Theodosius's mausoleum. So Ai Nancy took it for granted that the formation eye hidden in the mausoleum was opened by Zhang Tianyi. Maybe Zhang Tianyi already knew about this. Facing Wen De alone was already very difficult for them. Now there was another person who was closest to God. Ai Nancy suddenly felt like 10 mountains were pressing down on her heart, making it hard for her to breathe. If possible, Ai Nancy hoped that she would never face Zhang Tianyi for the rest of her life. She had been Wen De's disciple for the past few years, so she also had some contact with Zhang Tianyi. She also heard Wen De talk about how terrifying Zhang Tianyi was. Don't try to be enemies with Zhang Tianyi. That was a very despairing enemy. Even the 23rd generation blood Mary of the same generation and the same level was a dim existence. Chapter 22-29. I suddenly feel a bit bored, Chen Zhao complained. After what happened in Theodosius I's tomb, of course I don't find the fights between these guys that exciting anymore. After all, the battle between the Holy Glory was intense, but everyone had some leeway. Therefore, it wouldn't be like the endless battle in Theodosius I's tomb. Chen Zhao would naturally find it boring too. Just then, Chen Zhao and Bifla discovered that several teams were fighting at the same time. They included the monks from Wutai Mountain and the demons from the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals. Right now, they were fighting against 3 teams. There was still a gap between the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals and Wutai Mountain. But right now, the 2 teams were strangely in sync. More accurately, the 3 teams were attacking them together. It was a huge battle between foreign and foreign. The 3 foreign teams were targeting the Wutai Mountain and Alliance of 10,000 Immortals. Of course, the 2 teams had to work together to fight against the foreign enemies. Even though they were outnumbered, the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals and Wutai Mountain were not at a disadvantage. The main reason was obviously because of the 2 teams' strength. They seem to have grown a lot, Chen Zhao said, sighing. Of course. If they don't grow after experiencing that, then they're not worthy of their title as geniuses among their peers. Geniuses weren't limited to people with great comprehension or talent. Another type was that they progressed slowly during cultivation, but they could break through continuously in battles and danger. Of course, a battle in the spirit world was still a battle of attrition. Both sides reinforced and restrained each other. The combination of magical attributes and skills would also greatly increase combat power. For example, the monks from Wutai Mountain were like cockroaches that couldn't be killed. They would break the formation of the 3 opposing teams and cut them up. Then, the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals would take them down one by one. To be honest, the monks from Wutai Mountain couldn't be invincible. However, they were immune to most spells. The few spells that could hurt them were also greatly weakened. This was very similar to Chen Zhao's non-elemental constitution. As for the members of the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals, most of them had racial talents. From their spells, one could guess what their original forms were. In the end, the two sides retreated without a clear winner. Linglong, why did they retreat so easily? They should still have some strength left, right? Victor from Eastern Europe. He's a telepath. His senses are sharper than mine. He sensed danger approaching. As she spoke, she looked around. In the end, her gaze landed on Chen Zhao and Bifla. Just like the first time, Chen Zhao and Bifla were discovered again. If I can feel it, how can Victor not feel it? Tinkle raised her voice. Gentlemen, please come out. Chen Zhao and Bifla didn't try to hide anymore, but they were spying on someone, after all, so it was a little awkward. At this time, the Wutai Mountain team and the Union of 10,000 Immortals team had no intention to make their move. They were calm, extremely calm. He had to calm down, they couldn't beat him at all. There was no chance of winning at all. Therefore, they accepted this fact calmly. If it was them in the past, they would have definitely attacked the other party. But as soon as Chen Zhao and Bifla appeared, they gave up on the idea. Gentlemen, do you have anything to teach us? Nothing. We've been walking around here for a long time, but it's all been boring battles. Following you guys is more interesting. I hope you can bring us more fun. This is against the rules, right? As long as you treat us like air, we won't interfere with any of your battles. Everyone was looking at each other. You two following us is the biggest obstacle, right? Even if they didn't make a move, these two monster-level spiritualists would be able to kill them. Even if they didn't attack, just standing beside them would give anyone a great sense of pressure. What? You're not willing? Bifla's gaze gradually turned cold. After Bifla's question, no one dared to say no. Then will you help us? Tinkle asked in anticipation. These two should be otherworldly masters. At least, they wouldn't follow them to watch the show for nothing. No, don't even think about it. Bifla rejected Tinkle's suggestion decisively without hesitation. Tinkle didn't dare to speak her mind. She could only think about it in her mind. Although these two people's cultivation base was high, they really didn't know how to behave. Sirs, our strength is not the strongest, and our level is limited. We are far from reaching the top level of the Battle of Holy Glory. For example, the Sage Sect team and the Church team are the seeded teams this time. Their battle should be very exciting. It's not good. Whether it's the Sage Sect team or the Church team, when other teams meet them, they just directly bypass them. Moreover, they also know how to keep a low profile and don't take the initiative to fight with others. We've been following these two teams for a while, but nothing happened. It's disappointing. Sometimes fame was capital. For example, the Sage Sect team and the Church team were like privileged people. All the teams that met them would take the initiative to retreat, unwilling to have a conflict with them. Unless there were 3 or more teams, it was possible to join forces and have a conflict with the former. However, the Wutai Mountain team and the Union of 10,000 Immortals team didn't have that kind of capital. No matter which team met them, they would first ask for advice from them. For example, before, they had 2 conflicts with other teams. They were also very helpless about this. After all, they could only be considered an average team in the Battle of Holy Glory. They were a far cry from the top teams. If Chen Zhao and Bifla followed them and were willing to provide some help, the 2 teams would be happy to have them follow. But Chen Zhao and Bifla only treated them like monkeys. They didn't plan to provide any help at all. We won't have any intense battles. Even if we do, it'll probably be very boring for you too. No, the psychic jade you got earlier might lead you to very special places. As long as you go to those special places, special things will definitely happen. We're looking forward to it. We've already decided to give up following the psychic jade, Tinkle said. Really? Then forget it, Chen Zhao said with a smile. But there are a dozen teams nearby. I hope you won't meet them. Chen Zhao smiled. This was a blatant threat. Chapter 2230. The team from Wutai Mountain and the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals could only accept Chen Zhao and Bifla's suggestion helplessly. 3 hours later, the team from Wutai Mountain and the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals had just finished a big battle. There were still no casualties on either side, but both sides had used up a lot of magic power. From the corner of their eyes, they saw Qin Zhao and Bifla sitting on a pile of ruins. They said they were going to watch a show, so they really were. They had no intention of interfering. After the battle, Qin Zhao and Bifla appeared before them again. Looks like you've improved a lot. I can guarantee that if you met those two teams a day ago, you would definitely lose. In that case, we should be thanking you, Linglong said in an annoyed tone. There's no need for that. However, all of you have fought quite a few battles along the way without any gains. If this continues, it will be very difficult to guarantee that all of you will advance. So, it's better to follow the Psychic Jade's guidance and head to the next location instead of engaging in meaningless battles with random people. Of course, Exquisite knew that this kind of battle was pointless. But the other teams had the same idea. They all wanted to try their luck on the other side. But like most teams, they didn't have absolute power. So, this kind of battle often ended without any results. No one could gain any advantage from the other. But it would also waste energy and energy. Soul Essence stones were too hard to find. Also, the guardian beast that guarded them wasn't weak. So, it was better to find opportunities on other teams. Of course, this tactic wasn't completely risk-free. For example, if the other team didn't have a Soul Essence stone, then it would be a waste of their time and energy. Or if the other team had a Soul Essence stone, but they couldn't beat it, then all their efforts would be in vain. It was more likely that he would be taught a lesson by the other party, and even the Soul Essence stone in his hand would be taken away. But if they didn't rely on robbing, it would be too difficult to rely on just searching. Many teams couldn't find Soul Essence stones, so they were good at stealing. Of course, most of the teams belonged to the chaotic neutral type. This meant that they would steal from others as long as they had the chance. If they could find Soul Essence stones with their own team's ability, they would also work hard. The team from Wutai Mountain and the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals were chaotic neutral. As for the top teams, they were kind neutral. They didn't need to steal other people's Soul Essence stones. They had enough ability to find and obtain the Soul Essence stone. Moreover, no one dared to provoke them. This was an applicable rule in any field. The people at the top of the pyramid looked down on all living beings, while the people below the pyramid fought with all their might. Don't think about it. With your strength, if you don't take some risks, it will be very difficult for you to break out of this encirclement. As a cultivator, you should be courageous and fearless. Hesitating like this will greatly affect your state of mind in the future, Qin Zhao said, trying to bewitch them. The main reason was that the teams from Wutai Mountain and the Union of 10,000 Immortals were too cowardly. Even when they were fighting against other teams, they would be afraid of the slightest thing. It was simply too boring. We can follow the guidance of the Psychic Jade, but if there's any danger, I hope you won't just stand by and watch. For the Wutai Mountain team and the Union of 10,000 Immortals team, the previous incident in the mausoleum of Theodosius I was completely unexpected. If it happened again, they would die even if they had 10 lives. This is against the rules. Bifla refused again. But if it's really something that threatens your life, we definitely won't leave you to die, Chen Zhao added. Actually, according to the previous incident, when Chen Zhao and Bifla interfered, the Wutai Mountain team and the Union of 10,000 Immortals team had already lost the right to participate. Nevertheless, as long as they weren't caught red-handed and both sides kept their mouths shut, no one would investigate further. On one hand, Exquisite didn't want to encounter something like that again. But if she didn't want to be eliminated, she had to take the risk. Exquisite took out the Psychic Jade. After injecting some magic into it, it floated up and led the way for them again. Qin Zhao and Bifla returned to the shadows. Will the Psychic Jade be complicated to make? The process isn't. Both the East and the West have similar alchemy products, so the process is basically the same. It's just that the raw materials aren't ordinary. They can even be said to be very expensive. If it's converted to regular currency, it's probably over $100 million. Are the organizers this extravagant this time? Taking out such an expensive thing and throwing it on the street? I suspect that this psychic jade was placed there by the organizers. The first location that this psychic jade pointed to was Theodosius I's mausoleum. The danger and difficulty of that place is not something that these teams can handle. Are you saying that there are other people involved in this matter? Someone purposely used this psychic jade to confuse the participating teams and make them think that it was placed there by the organizers? If there's no accident, that should be the case. The organizers are too careless, right? Someone actually used this trial to do something like this. To do this, it's either Wendy, the main person who set up the Barren Lands market, or someone close to him. You already have a suspect? It's none of my business. Even if I have a suspect, I won't do anything. Why? Someone close to Wendy. He can't find the problem himself. It's an insult to him to have an outsider like me remind him. Qinzhao thought for a moment and understood Bifla's concerns. There was no direct evidence for this either. If Bifla said it but didn't have evidence, he might even be bitten in the back because of this. So when they weren't very close, of course, it was none of his business. Isn't that Ruik Des in front? Why is he here? Qinzhao said in surprise. Qinzhao noticed that there was a figure in the direction where the Wutai Mountain team and the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals were heading. It was none other than Ruik Des. Mado Shinji is here too. She's here? Where? How come I don't see her? Why can you see her but I can't? Ruik Des covered her aura and set up an illusion of her body. You can't see her. Just then, the Wutai Mountain team and the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals also noticed Ruik Des. Both sides stopped and observed each other. A psychic jade also floated in front of Ruik Des. Both sides looked at each other in surprise. Chapter 2231. Both sides met following the psychic jade. At this time, the two originally floating psychic jade turned at the same time and pointed to a road next to them. At this time, Ruik Des spoke first. It seems that our goal is the same thing. Yes, what a coincidence. The Wutai Mountain team and the Union of 10,000 Immortals looked at Ruik Des with vigilance. Although Ruik Des was also vigilant, he was more confident in his own strength. He was not afraid of the Wutai Mountain team and the Union of 10,000 Immortals team. I advise you to give up. That is not something you can reach. Even if you are lucky enough to reach the end, I will not show any mercy to you. Do you want to fight? Exquisite's words had already made her attitude clear. If they wanted to get what the psychic jade pointed to, they could, but they had to first defeat them. Ruik Des snorted coldly. If it were not for Madwa Shinji who was beside him, he did not mind teaching these overconfident guys a lesson. Let's go, Ruik Des said coldly. Mr. Des, they are your competitors. Are you just going to let them go? Madwa Shinji asked in confusion. Even if they find that place, they can't reach the end. Although they are competitors, they are not a threat to me at all, so there is no need to waste magic on them. Bifla, I can understand hiding your breath. I can also understand hiding your body, but what I can't understand is why I can't see Madwa Shinji and always subconsciously ignore her. When we first met, you used the same magic. What is going on? In fact, it's very simple. The evidence of a person's existence is other people's senses. As the saying goes, everyone lives in the eyes of others, and it is the existence of others that proves your existence. Of course, this kind of eyes does not only refer to the eyes, but also the senses, memories, and impressions. Whether it is me or Madwa Shinji's magic, it is equivalent to releasing a wrong signal, making you mistakenly think that there is nothing there and thus ignore her existence. Bifla said. This is the art of deception. The person who first created this magic was a killer, and today, there are still many organizations in the shadows using this magic to murder. This kind of magic that people neglect is indeed impossible to guard against. Qinzhao had to admit that if an assassin with this spell tried to ambush him, it would be hard for him to notice it immediately. Actually, there are still many flaws in this magic. Even if an assassin uses this magic to get close to you, As long as he makes a move, his murderous aura will definitely be exposed. It's like a piece of pure white paper. As long as it's stained with a little ink, it will be incomparably clear. The psychic jade brought Ruik Des and the two teams into a sewer entrance. The sewers of modern cities were almost like giant mazes. Without the guidance of the psychic jade, most people would probably starve to death here without being able to find the exit. Fortunately, this was only a mirror image of Istanbul's sewer system, and there was no stinking sewage. 2 hours after the Wutai Mountain team and the Union of 10,000 Immortals team entered the maze, the group found a door that stood out in the sewers. It did not fit in with its surroundings, but it was embedded into the wall. The door looked very old, and the frame of the door was wrapped in metal. The door planks were made of some unknown plant, and there were exquisite runes engraved on them. Exquisite tried to pull the door, but she did not succeed. The group was about to use violence to open the door. If you want to die here, continue to use violence to open the door. Bifla appeared. Sir, is there a problem with this door? This door is called the Gate of Laws. Only by acting according to the rules set by this door can you open the true passage. If you try to use violence or disobey the rules to open this door, you will be taken to an unknown place by this door, or you will be killed directly. But what rules are there on this door? Does it have an artifact spirit? It's not an artifact spirit. The runes engraved on the door are the rules. What language are these runes? Ancient Babylonian. Ancient Babylonian? The race that tried to build a tower that reached the sky in the Bible, but it angered God and was destroyed. That's right. In the legends, ancient Babylonians once ruled the entire world. The other races also used ancient Babylonian. God sent down divine punishment and cut off the Babylonian tower. He exiled every race to the north and south of the world, making it impossible for them to communicate in the same language. From then on, ancient Babylonian lost its inheritance. Sir, do you know what these runes mean? The skill of a thief, Bifla said. The loser will pay with a finger. What does that mean? Do any of you know the skill of a thief? The group looked at each other. Finally, Wei Daheng came out. What do I need to do? You know the skill of a thief? I used to be the leader of a group of thieves. Do you think I know the skill of a thief? Use your skill of a thief to open this door. Is it that simple? This is the first door. There are more and more dangerous rules behind it. Just use the skill of a thief to open the door? Yes. Wei Daheng took out a metal wire from his ear. Click! It didn't take long before they heard the crisp sound of the door being locked. The door was opened. When the group entered the door, the first door suddenly closed. At this moment, monsters drilled out from the ground. The strength of these monsters was very ordinary. They didn't bring any trouble to the group. The group turned here and there and found the second door. The shape and runes were the same as the first door. The group looked left and right, looking for Bifla. After all, apart from Bifla, no one else in the group knew about the ancient Babylonian mosquito. Sir, what does the second door represent? Bifla went forward and touched the door lightly. The rules on it say that the door will only open when the requirements are met. Linglong, it's too dangerous. We still don't know what's going on here. Rubik's Cube. Rubik's Cube? What does that mean? Chapter 2232. Everyone looked over and saw a pure black Rubik's Cube floating there. The 6 sides of this pure black Rubik's Cube were all the same color. What is this Rubik's Cube? How do we operate it? Just then, Bifla fell silent again. On the other hand, Chen Zhao looked at the pure black cube with interest. He was also curious about how to operate it. Seeing that Bifla didn't speak, everyone looked at Chen Zhao. Don't look at me, Chen Zhao said helplessly. Seeing that Chen Zhao and Bifla couldn't help or were purposely not helping, Exquisite couldn't help. They could only think of a solution themselves. Exquisite walked up and tried to send her mana into the cube. Sure enough, the moment Exquisite's magic power entered the magic cube, it began to spin. Immediately, many small magic arrays appeared around them. magical beasts crawled out of the arrays. Without any communication, these beasts were clearly here on a mission to attack the intruders. However, they weren't strong and there weren't many of them. The group easily wiped out the demonic beasts. Just then, the cube spun again. The next moment, another magic array appeared. A large magical beast crawled out of it. This magical beast's strength was quite formidable. Everyone had a hard time. It took them half an hour. In the end, it was beaten down by everyone. Exquisite, what's going on? My guess is that if we send magic power into the magic cube, then the magic cube will rotate according to the amount of magic power. Every time it rotates, a batch of demon beasts will appear. Moreover, different combinations will also produce different demon beasts. If it's a normal cube, we can at least know how to spin all 6 sides. But this cube is pure black. All 6 sides are the same color. We won't be able to finish it even if we spin it until the end of time. No, let me think. Maybe there's something we don't know. Exquisite looked at the cube, deep in thought. The others didn't dare to send Phalion anymore. Can we destroy this Rubik's Cube? Everyone looked at Bifla. They all wanted to hear the answer from Bifla. Yes, Bifla said. Sacrificing a person's life is the value of the cube. Upon hearing Bifla's words, everyone immediately dispelled this thought. Is there no other way? Just follow the rules and pass. On the other hand, Qin Zhao had been observing the cube. The pure black Rubik's Cube was meaningless. There had to be a way to make the true colors appear. Qin Zhao walked forward and sent his immortal power into the Rubik's Cube. In an instant, the originally pure black Rubik's Cube split into 9 red cubes on different sides. At the same time, the Rubik's Cube began to spin. Furthermore, it didn't just rotate once, but continuously. He continued to rotate until all 9 of the red cubes were gathered on one surface. Everyone was shocked. They'd been worried that Qin Zhao's rash actions would bring disaster to them. But in the next moment, everyone suddenly felt that their magic power had completely recovered. Then the 9 identical red sides lost their color and became red again. Eh? Sir, how did you do it? Qin Zhao rubbed his chin and didn't answer the man's question. Everyone looked at each other. Exquisite decided to give it another try. Exquisite tried to send her magic power into the Rubik's Cube again. However, Ling Long's magic power only caused a small square to light up. After turning it once, it immediately returned to black. The next moment, a demon covered in flames crawled out of the magic formation. Everyone's magic power went back into the battle. This flaming demon was very strong. It was more than a level stronger than the previous 2 groups. After the great battle, everyone was exhausted. Just then, the shameless Qin Zhao attacked again. Moreover, Qin Zhao had activated 9 red facets and combined them into a complete facet. Everyone instantly recovered their energy and magic power. Strange, why can't I activate the other colors? Qin Zhao looked at his hand. No matter how much immortal power he sent in, he could only activate one face. He had plenty of immortal power. The power absorbed by the Rubik's Cube was like a drop in the ocean. But Qin Zhao's immortal power still couldn't activate the other colors. I understand the rules of the Rubik's Cube. Exquisite suddenly understood. First of all, everyone's magic power can only activate one color. If you activate 9 small cubes of the same color at the same time, it will directly form a face of the same color. The other colors will combine to summon enemies, and the face of the same color will restore the magic power and energy we've expended. That means we need at least 6 people to input magic power at the same time. Our magic power also needs to be continuously sent into the Rubik's Cube until all 6 of us activate all the small squares at the same time? Fa Xing asked. That's right. As long as we can activate all the small squares at the same time, the Rubik's Cube will keep turning until all 6 of them are of the same color. But each of us can barely activate a small color block, let alone 9 of the same color at the same time. That's impossible. They knew that Qin Zhao was very powerful, so he could activate the same color alone. But they couldn't do it. They were too weak. Everyone looked at Qin Zhao again. If Qin Zhao helped, the process would be more troublesome. But Qin Zhao could activate the recovery function again and again. Apart from saving one person, they could also recover energy and magic power after each battle. This would save them a lot of trouble. Don't look at me, Qin Zhao said calmly. I won't help. Only Qin Zhao and Bifla had enough magic power to activate 9 small squares of the same color at once. The others couldn't even activate a small square. Exquisite thought for a moment and said to her companions, I have an idea. Everyone looked at Exquisite. We can choose 6 people to be responsible for injecting magic power into the Rubik's Cube, she said. We can't activate all 9 squares at once, but the magic we injected won't disappear. With enough time, we can completely fill up the Rubik's Cube. The others will be responsible for the things that are summoned when the Rubik's Cube turns. Exquisite paused and then said, But if we purely rely on our own magic power recovery speed, it will take far too long. So, it's best to recover our magic power every once in a while through the magic cube's single-colored light. But our magic power levels are similar. How can we activate one side so quickly? Everyone's magic power is different. Even if we inject magic power at the same time, we'll activate different colored squares. Didn't you use a trick before where 10 people gathered magic power on one person? We can use it to increase efficiency. Chapter 2233. To be honest, Qin Zhao and Bifla felt tired looking at the teams from Wutai Mountain and the alliance of 10,000 immortals. It was because of the difference in power, but this black spell had a strict requirement. Although they could use tricks like this, it would waste a lot of time. After all, it would waste a lot of time. Bifla, the strength and number of the summoned creatures seemed to be random. It's not random. It's based on the face with the most of the same color. For example, if there are 8 squares of the same color on one face, then only one will be summoned, and this creature will be very strong. If there are 8 squares of the same color on 2 faces, then 2 creatures of the same strength will be summoned. If every face is the same, then the summoned creatures will be weaker, but there will be a lot of them. Qin Zhao watched the 2 teams go through the difficult process. In the end, he couldn't help but step forward. Whatever, I'll help you. By this time, 3 hours had passed, but they were still a long way from assembling all 6 faces. If Qin Zhao and Bifla just watched, they would probably be locked here for 5 days. Why are you willing to help us now? Exquisite sounded dissatisfied. I'm not willing. Qin Zhao glanced at Exquisite. With that, Qin Zhao injected his immortal power and activated the 9 squares of the same color. At the same time, he had them combine into one face. The magic power that the 2 teams had used earlier was recovered again. Wutai Mountain's team could activate 9 squares of the same color with 10 people working together. However, the activation process was very complicated. It was also more careful and dangerous. After all, they had to gather all the magic power of the other 9 people into one person. It was like an inflated balloon that could explode at any time. So they sent it in bit by bit and sent it out bit by bit. It was like filling a pool with water from a faucet. There was a process. It couldn't be filled directly. The time needed to activate the 9 squares was barely enough to meet the needs of the others. After a few battles, they could all be activated and their magic power recovered. Qin Zhao was much more direct. As long as the 2 teams were willing, Qin Zhao could keep them at full magic power forever. This turned the situation from hell mode to simple mode. For spiritualists, as long as they had magic power, they wouldn't lose. So, things became very simple. The process became very easy and smooth. When the 6 faces of the Rubik's Cube were completely activated and the 6 faces of the same color rotated, the Rubik's Cube suddenly broke down into small cubes. These small cubes then reassembled into a 6-colored scepter. This 6-colored scepter was emitting a peculiar hue. The dazzling radiance of the scepter made anyone who saw it think it was a good item. Ling Long stretched out her hand to grab the scepter, but the scepter released a burst of multicolored light that shook her away. Everyone was stunned. Just as they were at a loss, the scepter moved on its own and came before Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao looked around. He was also shocked. Does this thing recognize me as its master? Qin Zhao reached out to hold the scepter. The scepter didn't reject him. This scepter's grade isn't very high, but it should have already developed a bit of intelligence. That's why it chose its master on its own. If you nurture it carefully, you might even be able to nurture a divine weapon. What the fuck is a godly artifact? Even if it's a godly artifact, it's useless. I've always used my fists to solve problems. Do I have to change to a long-range profession for this thing? I don't think that's appropriate. Qin Zhao looked at the scepter in his hand. How about you find someone else? I really don't need you here. Everyone was speechless. This scepter would be a priceless treasure no matter where it was. However, Qin Zhao's tone was full of disdain. After a spiritual weapon chooses its master, it won't betray him no matter what, Bifla said. They're simple and don't have complicated thoughts. Unless you're dead, it'll only recognize you as its master. Okay, I don't plan on dying for now. Qin Zhao weighed the scepter in his hand. They passed, right? What do we do now? As soon as he finished speaking, a 5-colored beam shot out of the scepter. The multicolored light fell on the opposite door. Then, the door made a clicking sound, and the door opened. The team from Wutai Mountain and the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals really didn't want to continue. It was too tiring. This level wasn't something spiritualists of their level could handle. For example, without Qin Zhao's help, they would probably need to spend 20 to 30 times more time to pass the test. They couldn't make any mistakes either. If they did, they wouldn't just face failure. Their lives would be in danger. But now, Qin Zhao and Bifla wouldn't allow them to retreat. After another half an hour of travel, they saw a figure in the distance. Ruik Des and Mato Hinji were standing in front of the third door. Ruik Des looked at the two teams coming from behind in shock. Qin Zhao and Bifla were at the back of the team and purposely hid, so Ruik didn't notice the two traitors. Ruik didn't think that these spiritualists, who were just kids in his eyes, could pass the second door so quickly. He was still at the third door, which made him feel awkward. He thought that the 20 people in the two teams definitely wouldn't be able to catch up to his speed. But reality slapped him hard in the face. You guys actually came, Ruik Des said, squinting. There was a hint of surprise and doubt in his voice. The Wutai Mountain team and the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals all looked at Ruik Des warily. Since Ruik Des could pass the second door alone, it meant that he was also very powerful. Don't be nervous. I don't plan on attacking you. Ruik Des' words didn't dispel the two teams' guard. In a sense, we're not enemies and we don't have any conflicts of interest. You want the Soul Stone, right? I don't need that. Plus, you've already proven your strength by passing the second door. I've also acknowledged you, so we can work together. Everyone looked at each other, although they hadn't completely dispelled their doubts. But if Ruik Des allied with them, it would undoubtedly be a great help to them. Chapter 2234. In the end, the two sides formed an alliance. Of course, it wasn't because they trusted each other. It was because they had no conflict of interest. Ruik wasn't a participant in the Battle of Holy Glory. So, he didn't need the Soul Stone. Ruik Des glanced at the two teams. Suddenly, he saw two figures at the back of the team. Ruik Des furrowed his brows. The two figures were obviously avoiding him. But Ruik didn't think too much about it. Can you tell us about the situation here? Tinkle looked at the gate in front of them. The gate was made entirely of black iron, and seemed to weigh at least 12 tons. Of course, if it was just this weight, it wouldn't be able to stop Ruik Des outside. This is? Everyone looked at Ruik Des in confusion. They didn't find anything special about the black iron gate. Ruik Des glanced at the crowd. Which one of you is an enhancer? The 10 big baldies all stood up. All of us, said Forensics. Ruik Des shook his head. Your 9th level Dharma won't do. You look down on us. This gate requires all of our magic power to combine and concentrate on one person to push it open. Can you do it? Ruik said. I want a real enhancer, preferably a strength type, not someone like you who has been enhanced by spells. Besides, your Dharma is still inclined to physique, and the strength bonus is pitifully low. The 10 monks immediately fell silent. Indeed, their spells were also enhancers. But they all had that kind of tortoise shell and didn't stand out in terms of strength. I'll do it. Just then, a big guy in a vest came out of the crowd. You're a beast spirit? What breed? Easterners called them monsters. Westerners also had the concept of monsters. But they called beasts in human form beast spirits. Water buffalo, said the big guy in the vest. You can do it. Ruik nodded. The biggest problem for me at this level is that there's no strength enhancer at the front. Ruik was also helpless about this. Even if there was no one else, his magic power was enough. But he wasn't an enhancer. He could not convert his magic power into pure power. The black iron door in front of him wasn't just a board, but an entire square. A huge piece of iron that weighed more than 100 tons. Of course, even if he had enough magic power, he would not do it alone. Even if they were now in an alliance, he did not fully trust the Wutai Mountain team and the Union of 10,000 Immortals team. Pushing such a heavy piece of iron consumed a lot of his energy as well. Therefore, if it was not necessary, he would not sacrifice himself. We don't know that kind of spell that concentrates all of our magic power on one person, Linglong said. It's fine. I can set up a mana-gathering magic array, Ruik said. Exquisite and Rook were scheming to take advantage of him. Exquisite originally wanted to say that they didn't know this magic, so she wanted Ruik to transfer the magic to Old Cow alone. But Ruik was experienced, and he easily dispelled Exquisite's intentions. Soon, Ruik finished preparing the magic array. When everyone stepped onto the magic array, they cautiously probed it. The effect of this magic array was similar to the previous spell used by the Wutai Mountain team. However, there was still a big difference between the two. Moreover, as the eye of the array, the Old Cow was also different from the big Baldy of Wutai Mountain. Everyone in the Wutai Mountain team knew the role and use of mana-gathering magic. They were also accustomed to each other's magical power. Plus, they had the same source of magical power, as well as their physique-strengthening method. With all these factors added up, they were able to use this spell freely. But Old Cow was different. As an ox demon, his physique was indeed stronger than that of other demons. However, the amount of external magical power that he could withstand was far lower than that of anyone in the Wutai Mountain team. Everyone in the magic formation was transferring their magic power to the Old Cow. Old Cow's face turned red. Although he felt the abundant magic power vibrating in his body, he didn't feel anything. Although he felt the abundant magical power vibrating in his body, he was also under great pressure. Convert the magic power in your body into power, and then push the iron door with all your strength. Ah! Old Cow roared and pressed his palms against the black door. Not enough! Looks like we need to increase the magical power output, Ruik said. No. Old Bull can't take any more magic power. This is his limit. Tinkle immediately interrupted Ruik words. This isn't his limit, Ruik said. Also, if he doesn't work hard, none of us will be able to take another step forward. Miss Exquisite, I can do it. I can still do it, Old Cow roared. Increase the magical power input. Exquisite's eyes flashed, but she didn't say anything in the end. Old Cow had a stubborn temper. Ruik words had agitated him. Rustle, just then, the black iron door began to move backward. It's moving, it's moving! More power, hold on! Old Cow's veins bulged, and his eyes widened. Suddenly, Old Cow's skin split open, and blood spurted out. Then Old Cow collapsed to the ground. Everyone hurried forward to check on Old Cow's condition. His meridians are severely damaged, a pale demon said. Thankfully, his demon core isn't injured. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to maintain his human form. It's all your rotten idea. Exquisite looked at Ruick Des, her tone very displeased. You can't blame me for this. Besides, I contributed the most magical power, so you naturally have to contribute as well. We are only allies, not subordinates. You better understand the situation. Humph. Exquisite snorted lightly and didn't say anything else. What do we do now? We've only pushed the door a little. It's far from meeting the requirements. Can't we destroy the door? This is obsidian. Although it's not as immune to magic as black profound gold, it still has extremely high magic resistance. When our magic lands on the obsidian, its power is reduced by 90%. Also, some magical metal has been added to the door, making the material even more indestructible. It's almost impossible to destroy the door through brute force. In any case, don't even think about letting Old Cow continue. He's already injured. I didn't say that he must go, but this obstacle still requires everyone's efforts. Chapter 2235. That door can only be pushed open, Chen Zhao asked. For you and I, of course, there are more choices. We can even destroy it directly, but they can't. Ruick Des might have other methods, but that method is too costly for him. He won't use this method, Bifla said. Ruick Des was still discussing with the two teams how to solve their current problem. Mado Shinji's gaze landed on the crowd. She didn't know why, but she had a strange feeling. It was a familiar yet strange feeling. She couldn't explain it, but she couldn't ignore it either. Madwa Shinji looked at the two teams. Suddenly, she saw two figures. The two figures only appeared for a brief moment before disappearing in front of her eyes in an instant. Mado Shinji's heart skipped a beat. It's you! It was only for a moment, but Mado Shinji immediately thought of the two extremely evil traitors. Everyone turned to look at Madwa Shinji. They didn't know about Mado Shinji's existence. When they saw Mado Shinji, they were shocked at first. Then they looked at her even more warily. They didn't understand why there was suddenly another person. Mado, what's wrong? Ruick Des asked. At the same time, his voice indicated that Mado Shinji wasn't an enemy. Mr. Des, it's those two, Mado Shinji said. Madwa Shinji said. Those two are in their team. No, to be precise, those two are part of their team. Those two people, are you talking about? The two guys who betrayed us back then? Yes, those two. Ruick Des didn't like Chen Zhao and Bifla either. Because in his and Mado Shinji's eyes, Chen Zhao and Bifla were traitors. Ruick Des scanned the surroundings but didn't see Chen Zhao and Bifla. But he believed in Mado Shinji's eyes. Come out, two traitors. I know you're here. There's no point in hiding anymore. Traitors? Chen Zhao and Bifla revealed themselves at the same time and walked out of the crowd. Both Chen Zhao and Bifla couldn't accept the word traitor. The so-called traitors were those who were loyal to their original target, or those who went against their original promise. And neither of them felt that they had ever been loyal to Ruick Des. At best, they were just using each other. To be more precise, everything they did was for their own amusement. Therefore, they felt that since they had never pledged loyalty, how could there be any betrayal? Ruick Des was even less qualified to gain the loyalty of any one of them. Of course, Ruick Des did not think so. Mr. Ruick, why do you think we betrayed you? Chen Zhao had an unfriendly smile. Do you need me to explain the process of your betrayal again? Ruick said coldly. Everyone looked at Chen Zhao and Bifla curiously. Both of them used to work for Ruick Des. Could it be that Ruick Des was stronger than both of them? From the beginning to the end, we have never done anything to let you down. To us, it was just a game. Even in the end, we did not take the initiative to deal with you. Furthermore, weren't you using us? We were just cooperating with you to put on a show. Hearing Chen Zhao's words, the team from Wutai Mountain and the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals were dazed. These two were not only terrifyingly powerful, they were also full of bad taste. Ruick Des was clearly the same as them. They were all hurt by their bad taste. No matter how you argue, you can't change your betrayal. Traitors must pay the price. Mr. Ruick, you can't beat any of us. Qin Zhao stated a fact. Although this fact wasn't all that pleasant. But Qin Zhao still had to say it. But this obviously unpleasant answer completely infuriated Ruick Des. You mean, you're stronger than me? Without a doubt. Qin Zhao and Baifla answered at the same time. Suddenly, a few colorful potion bottles appeared in Ruick's drooping hands. Perhaps you should show some respect to your former master. The bottles exploded at the same time. A thick smoke mixed with magic spread in the air. Retreat! Tinkle exclaimed. This is magic burn. The colorful magic smoke was very famous. As long as one inhaled it, it would be like dropping a match into a barrel of gasoline. They would be instantly ignited. Everyone hurriedly retreated. They did not want their bodies to become a barrel of gasoline. But Qin Zhao and Baifla had no intention of dodging. Baifla's body was instantly ignited. Ruick Des was about to say a few harsh words in an arrogant manner. But he realized that Baifla, whose body was ignited, did not cry out in pain nor struggle. It was as if nothing had happened. He just stood there calmly. Qin Zhao was even more exaggerated. Although he was covered in thick smoke, nothing happened. This kind of attack is meaningless. You better use direct attacks. Qin Zhao's words were frivolous but also very hurtful. Ruick Des's expression darkened even more. Just then, a thick black aura emanated from his body. The aura of death. It was something that could not be touched. But Qin Zhao and Baifla still stood where they were. The flames on Baifla's body were still not extinguished. Qin Zhao still stood there without moving. Nothing happened. Tinkle could tell that Qin Zhao and Baifla did not plan to attack. She thought of the battle in Theodosius' tomb. Qin Zhao and Baifla had both displayed boundless power. So, they might have the pride of being strong and did not want to argue with Ruick Des. Actually, it was not because Qin Zhao and Baifla were that generous. It was mainly because they did not want to hurt Ruick Des. After all, Ruick Des was an ally of the Wutai Mountain Team and the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals. With the abilities and power of the Wutai Mountain Team and the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals, it was almost impossible for them to pass through all the checkpoints alone. Ruick Des was a very important part. With him, perhaps the two teams could pass through the checkpoints. Unfortunately, Ruick Des did not appreciate the kindness. He also did not think that the two had good intentions. Ruick Des took out another magic item and threw it at his feet. The next moment, Ruick Des's body was covered in a layer of intertwined red and blue armor. The design of the armor was similar to that of a Gundam. It was quite modern. It didn't feel like a simple knight's armor, but a robot that exuded advanced technology. Of course, this Gundam armor was actually powered by magic power. The manufacturing process was also mainly magic. There was no technology involved. Chapter 2236. This was Ruick Des's pinnacle work of alchemy. Most of these magic tools with exoskeletons and mecha attributes had an indestructible defense. At the same time, they had varying attack power depending on the alchemist's skill. Everyone speculated that Ruick Des might be a Gundam fan because he really looked like a Gundam from the outside. Pointing his fist at Qin Zhao and Baifla, Ruick Des yelled, "Explosive punch!" The Gundam's right fist left its wrist and flew toward Qin Zhao and Baifla. Bang! The iron fist smashed into Qin Zhao's face. Then it fell to the ground powerlessly. Qin Zhao touched his cheek. Don't hit the face when you hit someone. Do you know that? Ruick Des's expression changed slightly. He already knew that Qin Zhao was an enhancer. He knew that Qin Zhao's body was much stronger than normal people. Even enhancer spiritualists couldn't compare. But now, Qin Zhao was completely unharmed after taking a punch to the face. But this couldn't make Ruick Des admit defeat just like that. Since physical attack and defense were strong, he could just change his attack method and element. A blue current suddenly shot out from the Gundam's missing wrist. The current charged toward Qin Zhao with an unstoppable force. Boom! After the current, Qin Zhao was still unharmed. Ruik Des's expression changed again. This didn't work? Ruik Des couldn't help but hesitate. He was confident that he still had other methods and even trump cards. He could definitely defeat these two arrogant and ignorant guys. But was it really worth it to pay such a huge price for them? Most of the time, the attitude of the two sides on the battlefield depended on the opponent's strength. If Qin Zhao and Biflo were really enemies that could be wiped out at will, Ruik Des definitely wouldn't be stingy with his casual attack. But he didn't give up just like that. He wanted to try again with an even stronger attack. Just then, an energy palm formed at the Gundam's broken right wrist. The energy palm condensed another energy sword. Hiss! The Wutai Mountain team and the alliance of 10,000 immortals all gasped. What a massive magic power! We'd better hide further away, Fei said solemnly. In the past, when he and his fellow disciples faced most of the attacks, they directly used their faces to block. But in the face of Ruik Des's attack again, it was too late. He didn't have much confidence. At the same time, he once again felt the difference brought about by different levels. Only a huge amount of pure magic power could condense such a weapon. From this, it could be seen that Ruik Des's magic power had reached the highest level. Of course, if it was just magic power, the amount of consumption would be too large. Even Ruik Des would not waste magic power like this. It was released through the Gundam's internal magical device after it compressed and transformed mana. Although it looked powerful, it didn't consume as much mana as he had imagined. Ruik Des growled and raised his sword. This was the perfect combination of physical and magical attacks. It surpassed the vast majority of attacks. Most of the spiritualists, no matter how powerful they were, would either use magic or physical attacks to attack. There were very few ways to attack with both physical and magical elements at the same time. The energy blade slashed at Qin Zhao's neck. Qin Zhao grinned. Dark magma suddenly shot up, blocking the energy blade and wrapping around it at the same time. He didn't want to see who was tougher between his neck and the energy blade. Ruik Des wanted to pull out his sword and slash again, but when he pulled it out of the dark lava, he realized that it was actually corroded. Ruik Des was not disappointed. Instead, he felt proud. He had tested Qin Zhao's bottom line. This was Qin Zhao's first time actively defending. This meant that the attack could hurt him. Just then, Tinkle said, "Guys, I don't know what grudges you have, but now is definitely not the time for you to fight." Ruik Des wasn't completely unconcerned. After all, they were in a dilemma. The space here wasn't very big. In the previous attacks, he had purposely chosen to attack in a specific direction. He just didn't want to affect Madwa Shinji. Madwa Shinji's body was stronger than a normal person's, but if she faced Qin Zhao, she might be affected by the shockwaves. There were still 2 more levels. He had to conserve his magic for the next 2 doors. Also, with Tinkle's obstruction and persuasion, it gave him a way out. So, he didn't want to fight anymore. "After you leave this place, you'd better run faster." Ruik Des threw down a harsh sentence coldly. Qin Zhao smiled and didn't continue. Tinkle, on the other hand, was troubled. Originally, Ruik Des was willing to help. Now Qin Zhao and Bifla, 2 great enemies, were eyeing him. He would definitely be more careful. "Since they're here, I won't do it alone. Plus, I'm allying with you, not them." Ruik Des made it clear. Either everyone stared at him, or they had to help too. Tinkle was afraid of this. She couldn't help but blame Qin Zhao and Bifla. Not only did they have bad interests, but they also made enemies everywhere. "We can help too. How about you leave this level to us? What do you think?" The flames on Bifla's body had already been extinguished. His clothes weren't damaged at all, let alone his skin. Ruik Des's eyes narrowed. He couldn't tell what magic system Bifla used. Elemental magic? Didn't seem like it. There were no elemental waves on him. Ruik Des's gaze shifted to Qin Zhao again. This made his heart inexplicably heavy. Dealing with Qin Zhao was already difficult enough. Now there was Bifla, who he didn't know how powerful. He suddenly didn't have much confidence. Sure, if you can do it. Ruik Des also wanted to take this opportunity to probe Bifla's depths and his magic system. Bifla walked to the black iron door and pressed his hand on the door, made of obsidian. Suddenly, the place where Bifla's hand touched the door turned bright red. What was he going to do? Melt such a large piece of metal? Even normal metal would be hard to melt, not to mention that it was a black iron door fused with obsidian. Of course, Ruik Des didn't say anything. Instead, he watched Bifla's method seriously. Chapter 2237. The scorching red continued to spread on the black iron door. Soon, the entire front of the door turned pure red. At the same time, it emitted a scorching heat. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the black iron door began to melt. The boiling red molten iron was flowing downwards. Ruik's pupils constricted. What a huge amount of magic power! To melt such a huge black iron door mixed with obsidian, that wasn't something that regular magic could do. The threatening heat was proof of Bifla's terrifying power. Ruik calculated silently in his heart. In the end, he came to the conclusion that Bifla's magic power wasn't lower than his. Of course, pure magic power couldn't do this. It also had to meet the requirements of attributes. It was like how pure electricity couldn't melt iron. However, if it was converted into heat by a machine, it could be easily done. The others were even more amazed. Even Qin Zhao felt ashamed of his inferiority. The power needed to destroy something and melt it were two different concepts. Finally, the entire black iron door melted. It revealed an unobstructed passage. Bifla retracted his hand and the molten iron on the ground was sucked into his palm. No one knew how Bifla absorbed so much molten iron and where he stored it. Of course, the team from Wutai Mountain and the Alliance of 10,000 Immortals had already seen Bifla's power. Thus, they weren't surprised. Everyone stood before the passage. It was pitch black before them. There wasn't a single trace of light. But there were gusts of wind coming from inside. It was as if a huge creature was breathing inside. Everyone looked at each other. In the end, their gazes landed on Qin Zhao, Bifla, and Ruik Des. The three of them were the strongest, so it was only natural that they would be chosen as the vanguard. Of course, if it was just any one of them, the two teams wouldn't be able to control them. However, what made them feel fortunate was that the three of them were divided into two camps. The grudge between them gave the members of the two teams a chance to breathe. It's your turn to take the lead next, Mr. Ruik. Ruik Des glanced at the passage. I won't deal with the guy at the next level. He seemed to know what was inside. What's inside? A magical creature immune to magic, a behemoth. Behemoth? Is this a magical creature that specializes in physical attacks? Yes. Then leave this guy to me, Qin Zhao said. You're in charge of the next level? Sure. But that guy isn't easy to deal with. He's known as the Dragon Slayer, and his strength is greater than a dragon's. Everyone's eyelids twitched. Whether it was in the east or the west, a giant dragon was a symbol of power. A magical creature that could slay dragons was undoubtedly an extremely terrifying existence. But Qin Zhao didn't hesitate at all. He walked into the dark tunnel without looking back. Roar! A rough roar came from the passageway. Following that, the ground and ceiling began to shake. The continuous tremors caused everyone's heart to palpitate. The air rushing out of the passageway also became rushed. Rumble! There was another huge tremor. This time, the tremor was even more violent than before. The passageway looked like it was about to collapse, on the verge of collapse. Suddenly, two beams of light appeared in front of them. The two beams of light appeared very suddenly, but they only lasted for about 10 seconds. The beams of light gradually dimmed. We can go in now, Bifla said indifferently, leading the way. Ruik Des furrowed his brows, but he still followed closely behind. When they reached the end of the passageway, they saw the corpse of a giant beast with its head separated from its body on the ground. The beast's hideous and terrifying head was facing the passageway they'd come from. The two beams of light they'd seen earlier were the eyes of the head. But in the end, the light disappeared along with its life force. Ruik Des saw that Qin Zhao had his hands in his pockets and was clean. He didn't look like he'd just gone through a huge battle. Ruik Des couldn't help but speculate. What method had Qin Zhao used to kill the beast in such a short time? Ruik Des's gaze landed on the beast's decapitated head. The cut was very smooth. It looked like it had been cut by a sharp weapon. This guy was also very scary when he was young. This was Ruik Des's evaluation of Qin Zhao. Where did these two asterisk holes come from? He'd never heard of these two people in the spiritual world. With their abilities, they should have been famous long ago. But Ruik Des was very unfamiliar with them. He'd never heard of them at all. He didn't know that Bifla was very famous. Nevertheless, Bifla was very low-key and almost never appeared in public. Thus, very few people knew him. Even if someone did, most would only think of him as a rich man in Central Asia. He wasn't the leader of a sect in the spiritual world. Qin Zhao, on the other hand, was completely unknown. He was also purposely hiding his abilities. Moreover, Ruik Des was a spiritualist who was wanted. There was very little information he could get. "It's your turn, Mr. Ruik." Ruik Des didn't decline anymore. Just like Qin Zhao before, he walked deeper into the passageway without looking back. Qin Zhao and Bifla followed leisurely at the back. "Put this Beeman Beast corpse away. It's good stuff. Can it be sold for money?" "Yes, it's worth a lot. If you think it's troublesome, you can sell it to me in international currency." "What's your price?" "I don't know the market price." "Is it very useful?" "The value of an item doesn't depend on how useful it is. Instead, it depends on how rare it is. For example, how many uses does a diamond have? But after marketing, it becomes a symbol of love. This business model is also common in the spiritual world." "You still haven't told me the value of this Beeman Beast's corpse." "I'll pay $50 million. How about that?" "Let's wait for me to ask the professionals first." Qin Zhao felt that Bifla must have lowered the price. Thus, Qin Zhao felt that he had to ask someone first before deciding whether to sell it to Bifla. After putting away the Beeman Beast's corpse, Qin Zhao continued forward with the others. There were damaged puppets all along the way. Judging from the marks on the puppets, they should have been caused by Ruik Des not long ago. Chapter 2238. "What's going on here?" Qin Zhao asked, confused. "It doesn't feel like a place for people to live or for these kids to train. You still don't understand?" Bifla glanced at Qin Zhao. "Understand what?" "Theodosius I's tomb is the same. This place is the same. It's not for the participants of the Battle of Holy Glory. It's a trap." "Trap? Put yourself in their shoes and you'll understand. If it were you, would you set up such a difficult and dangerous trial for your subordinates?" Bifla asked. "This trap is for us?" Qin Zhao suddenly realized something. "You're thinking too much. The two of us just stumbled into this place by accident. This trap is probably targeted at the three chairmen. Normally, only spiritualists at the level of the three chairmen would be able to break a trap of this difficulty." "I don't know that, Wendy," Qin Zhao said. "But Zhang Tianyi and 23rd Blood Mary are both strong. This trap can't stop them." Of the three Shangqing realm cultivators that Qin Zhao knew, Zhang Tianyi was undoubtedly the strongest. 23rd Blood Mary was second. Bifla was a new Shangqing realm cultivator. He should be the weakest. Ignoring the latter two, Zhang Tianyi was the one Qin Zhao couldn't figure out the most. Qin Zhao was confident that he wouldn't lose to Zhang Tianyi. But he really wasn't confident that he could defeat Zhang Tianyi. The old man was really unfathomable. Even though Qin Zhao had the power of a demon lord. But when he faced Zhang Tianyi, he always felt uncertain. He didn't even want to stand on the opposite side of Zhang. Qin Zhao didn't know if this was his fear of Zhang, or if Zhang had some kind of power that was controlling his heart. Anyway, Qin Zhao felt that offending Zhang was really troublesome. Even in the past, Qin Zhao often dissed Zhang. But Qin Zhao had never truly stood on the opposite side of Zhang. Indeed, Qin Zhao had powerful and mysterious power. But Zhang also had a peerless orthodoxy. The accumulated wisdom of thousands of years had made Zhang Tianyi. Qin Zhao had estimated the difference in power between him and Zhang. The most optimistic outcome was that no one could do anything to the other. Naturally, Qin Zhao thought that since the trap didn't work on him, it wouldn't work on Mr. Zhang either. Moreover, it was still far from being effective or threatening. This trap isn't meant to threaten the three chairmen, nor is it meant to harm them. Instead, it's meant to borrow their power to solve something, Bifla said. His soul is in the mausoleum of Theodosius I. No, Theodosius' soul should be guarding something, maybe a demon or something else, and we killed Theodosius. It was not us, but you. It was you who killed Theodosius. Is there a difference? Asked Bifla calmly. But then again, since we know that if we destroy something here, something will be released, is there a need for us to continue? Aren't you curious at all? It's one thing to be curious, but what if we release a big problem? As you Chinese say, even if the sky falls, there'll be tall people to hold it up. Don't forget that you and I are both tall people here. If there's really a big problem, it'll probably be the two of us who clean up the mess. Fine, you make the choice. Should we stop them now? Qin Zhao thought about it and said unkindly, I can only promise that I won't attack from now on. The further they walked, the wider their field of vision became. More and more puppets were destroyed on the ground. As they walked further, they saw Ruik Des fighting a huge puppet. The puppet wasn't a regular human shape. It didn't have any regular forms. Instead, it kept changing. Every time Ruik Des attacked and destroyed it, it would change locally. The huge puppet was immune to most spells, so this battle was very troublesome for Ruik Des. The spells that could be effective were directional or regional spells that could directly cause damage. This was also Ruik Des's weakest point. Nevertheless, Ruik Des clearly still had some strength left. This battle didn't have any other details. It was the most direct display of combat power. If he wasn't strong enough, he couldn't win. If he was strong enough, he could pass. The most nervous person at the scene was undoubtedly Mado Shinji. Right now, Ruik Des was the most important person to her. He was also her mentor in her new life. In fact, they were even closer than mentors. In the end, Ruik Des still defeated the huge puppet after a tough battle. Not only that, Ruik Des even controlled the puppet and turned it into his weapon. Mado Shinji heaved a long sigh of relief. She turned her head to look for Qin Zhao and Bifla. But where were they? Where did they go? She couldn't find Qin Zhao anywhere. She immediately guessed that they'd escaped. As a loyal lackey of Ruik Des, Madwa Shinji of course immediately went to Ruik Des to snitch on him. Mr. Des, the two traitors escaped. Escaped? Ruik Des looked back for Qin Zhao and Bifla. As expected, they disappeared. Escaped now? Ruik Des was somewhat suspicious. Did they not want the last item? Or perhaps they were just hiding? After a moment of silence, Ruik Des yelled, Come out. I know you're still here. Don't think you can fool me like this. But Qin Zhao and Bifla still didn't appear. Had they really left? Did they feel that they couldn't defeat him, so they left? That must be it. Ruik Des was still very confident in his own strength. He could easily defeat such a powerful huge puppet. Moreover, the puppet had become his weapon. Qin Zhao and Bifla must have seen this and realized that they couldn't defeat him, so they'd escaped secretly. That old man's strong, but he's a bit too arrogant, Qin Zhao said. That's because he hasn't compared himself with a real expert. In his mind, the only people stronger than him are people like Celestial Master Zhang, but he doesn't know how much stronger Celestial Master Zhang is. Can he pass all the checkpoints alone? Probably. After all, he hasn't used his true strength yet. Chapter 2239. It was the first time Kelly and Evelyn came to the Wasteland Market. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't understand why this place existed. Through Caroline's blood and the spell of the necromancer they caught, they successfully entered the wasteland. Here, the streets and alleys were filled with terrifying monsters. This place was filled with grotesque and terrifying things. Indescribable existences watched them from the shadows. The fear of the unknown invaded their hearts. Even the necromancer that Kelly and Evelyn caught followed suit. He took every step carefully. "I brought you to the wasteland market. Can I leave now?" "No," Kelly said coldly. After observing and interacting with the spiritualist along the way, Kelly had a certain understanding of the spiritualist in front of her. Through indirect questioning, she found out that the spiritualist was called Zoma Dennis. He was an illusionary spiritualist, although Kelly didn't know anything about him. However, he roughly knew Zoma Dennis' weakness. He could create illusions and mastered beginner summoning spells. The monster that had attacked them and killed Caroline was summoned by Zoma Dennis. Zoma Dennis, on the other hand, was very weak in close combat or hand-to-hand combat. For example, when Kelly got close to him, he was immediately subdued. He didn't even have a chance to resist. "I've already brought you into the wasteland market. I'm useless now," Zoma Dennis said with a sad face. How could he be useless? They knew nothing about this place. Zoma Dennis was still very useful to them. "Leaving means death." Kelly pointed the gun at Zoma Dennis without hesitation. Along the way, Kelly had noticed Zoma Dennis's little tricks many times. Because of her ignorance of magic, Kelly was even more careful. Any little trick from Zoma Dennis would trigger Kelly's sensitive nerves. She also sensed that some of Zoma Dennis's actions were dangerous. Some of his actions were not dangerous. Fine. Zoma Dennis could only raise his hands helplessly. To be honest, he didn't want to scheme against them anymore. But he didn't want to die with them either. It was too dangerous for two ordinary people to walk around here. They were brought here to avoid being detected by the imprints on their bodies. However, the wandering monsters here did not rely on the mark to find people. They had extraordinary senses of smell, hearing, sight, and even aura perception. Moreover, they wouldn't care whether the other party was an ordinary person or not. In their eyes, there was only prey. These monsters were the training targets for the elite spiritualists. Zoma Dennis was not one of the elites. If he were to encounter those monsters, he would probably become their poop in less than a minute. He just wanted to leave the wasteland market and not stay here to die with them. But Kylie wouldn't accommodate him. He didn't even have a chance to escape. "Zoma, is there any magic in the spiritual world that can resurrect someone after their head is blown up?" "No," Zoma Dennis said. "No matter how powerful a spiritualist is, he will die if his head is destroyed. No exceptions? But in the past, I once used a sniper rifle to blow up someone's head. Then, he appeared before me alive and well. What happened? Maybe it's an illusion. Theoretically? Is it possible? I really blew up his head and he came back to life. Impossible. Why not? I've never heard of it. Maybe my level and realm are too low." Zoma Dennis thought it was just Kelly's wishful thinking. Hence, his reply was very nonchalant. Suddenly, a shadow loomed over him from behind. Zoma Dennis froze in an instant. In the next second, Kelly pushed Zoma Dennis away. The moment he rolled away, he saw a huge beast's claws slamming on the spot where he was standing. Zoma Dennis almost peed his pants in fear. "Quick, think of something." Kylie immediately pulled out her gun and fired a few shots at the beast's head. But the beast only tilted its head slightly, and the bullets bounced off its rough skin. The gigantic beast immediately chased after Kelly. Kelly managed to dodge the beast's attack by a hair's breadth. Zoma Dennis finally reacted. He used 20 seconds to cast a spell. Instantly, the beast's eyes lost focus. It froze on the spot. "What's going on?" Kylie turned to Zoma Dennis in surprise. "You dealt with it? We better run. I only used mind confusion to temporarily bewitch it. The spell's effect won't last more than a minute. If you have this spell, why didn't you use it on me before?" Zoma Dennis tilted his head and didn't speak. Of course, he wanted to use it on Kylie. but 20 seconds was enough for the female assassin to turn him into a beehive. Let's go. We still have time to talk. Ively, throw away your things. Why are you still carrying so many bags at a time like this? The three didn't run far before the beast's angry roar came from behind. As Kelly ran, she turned around and fired a few shots at the pursuing behemoth with the dual guns in her hands. Although the beast slowed down slightly, it still caught up. Kylie tossed another grenade. The beast opened its mouth and bit. However, the effect wasn't as good as before. The grenade exploded in the beast's mouth. The beast spat out a few mouthfuls of flames, but it wasn't fatally injured. You can't kill it with that? Kylie gasped. The grenade didn't hurt the beast. Instead, it became more violent. The gigantic beast swung its claws at Kylie. Kylie pounced like a hungry dog and dodged the beast's attack with great difficulty. However, she couldn't get up in time. The behemoth's second sweep was already within reach. At this moment, the gigantic beast's movements suddenly froze in place and stopped. Kylie looked at the beast in shock. If the beast's claws landed, she would lose her life. However, its claws seemed to be caught by something. Then, the beast's flesh started pulling backwards. More accurately, it was shrinking towards a single point. When the beast was completely shrunk into a single point, Kylie finally saw it clearly. There were two people standing behind the beast. One was a sage-like old man, and the other was a sloppy middle-aged man. Chapter 2240. The giant beast seemed to have landed in the palm of the sloppy middle-aged man when it finally shrunk to the end. Kelly looked at the two people. She didn't know if she should thank them. She didn't even know if the two people who had suddenly appeared were enemies. If they were enemies, then she would be in a more hopeless situation than she had ever been in the past. Such a terrifying huge beast was like a kitten in front of these two people. It was instantly killed. No matter how arrogant and ignorant Kelly was, she didn't think she could defeat them. As for Ively, she was so scared that her face had turned pale. As for Zoma Dennis, his eyes were fixed on the two men. Kelly could even hear Zoma Dennis' hurried breathing. Two commoners. Zhang Tianyi immediately realized that Kelly and Ively were commoners. When he walked towards the two female assassins, Ively was so scared that she raised her gun. Kelly couldn't stop her in time. Ively instinctively pulled the trigger. Zhang Tianyi tilted his head slightly and looked at the two women in surprise. So it's two female assassins. Zhang Tianyi turned his gaze to Zoma Dennis. He held his chin and thought for about 30 seconds. Oh, I see. Zhang Tianyi roughly guessed their relationship. He pointed at Zoma Dennis. Whose subordinate are you? Zoma Dennis's legs turned to jelly when Zhang Tianyi pointed at him. He knelt on the ground. Great sage, I am an external member of the Red Man Society. My name is Zoma Dennis. I work directly for President Kankira. I am under orders to hunt for the blood of assassins for the president. Zhang Tianyi had only asked casually, but Zoma Dennis had already spilled everything out. Kelly found it unbelievable. Previously, when Zoma Dennis was threatened by her, she had tried her best to make him confess some things intermittently. There were many things that he wasn't willing to say. For example, who ordered him to do it? No matter how Kelly threatened him, he had remained tight-lipped. But this old man had only asked that question. He hadn't even asked that many questions. He actually spat out all of his secrets. Who was this old man? How could he scare Zoma Dennis like this? Kelly was also very nervous at this moment. The old man only needed to tilt his head slightly to avoid Evelyn's bullets. And he was able to scare Zoma Dennis to this extent. Even if he used all his trump cards, he still wouldn't be able to defeat him. It wasn't a good feeling, putting his fate in someone else's hands. His life and death were all in the hands of others. But there was nothing Kelly could do. Right now, she was just a piece of meat on someone else's chopping board. Zhang Tianyi strolled over with a smile on his face. He could tell how nervous Kelly was, so he deliberately said in a teasing tone, Are you nervous now that your fate is in someone else's hands? Kylie almost pulled out the gun hidden behind her back. All right, relax. I don't plan on killing you. When Zhang Tianyi said those words, Kelly felt like she was about to collapse. It was as if all the pressure had been released in an instant. Do you feel like you've just survived a disaster? Actually, I was just joking. I'm going to kill all of you. Zhang Tianyi suddenly revealed a ferocious smile. Kelly pulled out her gun and pointed it at Zhang Tianyi. Zhang Tianyi suddenly laughed out loud. Haha. You're still joking. Kelly's chest heaved up and down. She was really scared. Even though Zhang Tianyi was only joking, which she couldn't tell if it was real or not, she still felt great pressure. It was as if 10 mountains were pressing down on her heart. Let's go. Follow me, Zhang Tianyi said. Where? Where are you taking us? To protect you, of course. I'll send you back to the outside world safely. Kelly wasn't naive enough to think that Zhang Tianyi was really that kind. You can refuse, but there are more than 20 monsters wandering around this area. Their activity areas are intersecting. Even if you know where they are, you won't be able to find any gaps to avoid them. If you act alone, your chance of survival is less than 0.1%. Zhang Tianyi said, and if you follow us, you have a 50% chance of being killed or not. The terrible chance chilled Kelly's heart. But just as Zhang Tianyi said, her only 2 choices now were so bloody. The difference was that one was almost certain death, and the other depended on Zhang Tianyi's mood. Wise choice. Zhang Tianyi laughed out loud. Let's go. Let's talk about interesting things in the world of assassins. Kelly took a deep breath and gathered her courage. Why should I tell you? Your life is in my hands now. Shouldn't you please me? No, from a psychological perspective, blindly pleasing me will only lose value. You know psychology very well. Do all assassins know psychology? Because I know psychology, I'm better than most assassins. Smart answer. Your answer increases your bargaining power. It makes me feel that you're a valuable person and increases your chance of survival. So, did it work? Just SOSO. Your answer made me even more curious about you, so your chance of survival has indeed increased. Kelly did know psychology. She even had a degree in psychology. She knew how to talk to people without making them feel repulsed. How many people have you killed? Or rather, how many missions have you accepted? More than 30. How long have you been in the profession? 15. You seem to be only 25. Yes, I started when I was 10. Kelly replied. How do you know my age? I'm a Taoist. All Taoists can tell fortunes. Then tell me about it. Do you know what price people have to pay to have their fortunes told by me? I have money. I have more money than you, Zhang Tianyi said rather arrogantly. Then what price? For now, I haven't found any value in you. Of course, if your story is good enough, it's possible. Can an assassin's story attract you? The world you're in contact with is far more mysterious than the world of assassins. My position has made me lose interest in most things. In my eyes, most people in the spiritual world are no different from ordinary people. So, your so-called mystery is just daily life to me. Then, can you guarantee my safety if I tell you a good story? Of course. A good story can prove your value. Even if it's fake? If you can make it so that I can't find any flaws, it doesn't matter even if it's made up. Chapter 2241. Do you know what the most difficult assassination mission I've ever encountered was? I don't. Zhang Tianyi looked at Kelly with great interest. Do you know the Kyle Army? Kelly asked again. Never heard of it. Mercenaries? No, it's a private army formed by the super-rich Kyle. The number of members is maintained at around 1,000, and they also have a fixed military base. As Kelly spoke, she secretly observed Zhang Tianyi's expression. Zhang Tianyi didn't look expectant. In fact, when he heard this, Zhang Tianyi already guessed that Kelly would tell him how she killed everyone. This kind of story wasn't attractive to Zhang Tianyi at all. If Zhang Tianyi wanted to hear this kind of story, there were plenty of spiritualists in the spiritual world who would be willing to tell him all day long. The military base is located in Antarctica, close to the central area, and it's almost impossible to get there with most transportation, Kelly said. Do you know how I got to the military base? Zhang Tianyi thought about it. All he could think of was using magic to get there. For Zhang Tianyi, this wasn't difficult at all. But on second thought, Kelly was just an ordinary person. For this, I rented a space shuttle, and when I flew to an altitude of 50,000 meters above the military base, I performed a high-altitude jump. At the same time, to avoid detection, I couldn't land at all, Kelly continued. A 50,000-meter jump? You didn't use a parachute? Are you sure you're not talking about a story from the spiritual world? Kelly ignored Zhang Tianyi's doubt and continued. Of course, this requires a certain amount of technical support, as well as certain external conditions. When I jumped from the space shuttle, I brought an inner inflatable balloon with me. This inflatable balloon can automatically inflate in 10 seconds. The inner inflatable balloon you're talking about is the kind in amusement parks that have a sphere outside and a small space inside for people to play in? That's right. But that kind of sphere shouldn't be able to withstand the impact of a 50,000-meter vertical fall, right? You shouldn't be able to withstand it either. Of course, it's impossible under normal circumstances, but what if it's not vertical? On the day of the jump, I calculated the weather in that area, and it just so happened that there was an extreme cold storm. The location I chose to land on was a slope of about 75 degrees. Zhang Tianyi finally revealed a look of surprise. In other words, you calculated where you would be blown by the wind, and then used a slope as a buffer? Safely land through the inner inflatable balloon? In theory, of course, it was possible, but in reality, it was very risky. A miscalculation or an incorrect assessment of the storm could cost Kelly her life. Kelly's whole story wasn't about how she killed everyone, but about how unbelievable the process was. Kelly's story did attract Zhang Tianyi. In fact, as you said, although I did the calculations and asked professional mathematical engineers to verify the calculations, in the process of execution, I was still blown away from the predetermined landing position, completely deviating from the predetermined slope. Then what did you do? No, I should say, how did you survive? When I was in the sky, I was falling at a speed of 100 meters per second, so I didn't have much time to think, so I could only change my strategy. I'd opened the inner inflatable balloon and changed the original height from 300 meters to 150 meters. In other words, if I didn't handle it well, I would be smashed into meat paste in less than 2 seconds. At this moment, even Ively and Zoma Dennis looked surprised and curious. They all wanted to know how Kelly managed to save the day. The moment the inner inflatable balloon was filled with air, I pierced the outer membrane and let the ball's air burst out instantly, forming a propulsion effect. I kept moving forward with the storm, and at the same time, it reduced the impact of my fall. Did you succeed? Kelly was standing in front of Zhang Tianyi now. He couldn't help but ask Kelly this question. On the surface, I succeeded. At least I didn't fall to my death. Kelly smiled bitterly and said, but both of my legs and one of my arms were completely broken. I lost the most basic ability to move. I lay in a world of ice and snow, as well as the world's most terrifying extreme cold storm, for 6 days. Although it was unfortunate, it could also be said that I was lucky. I fell in the habitat of a group of penguins. These penguins weren't afraid of humans, and they were even curious about humans. They were really a group of magical animals. On the second day I came into contact with them, they actually treated me as one of their kind and started catching fish for me to eat. In 6 days I recovered the most basic ability to move. Coincidentally, that Mr. Kyle was out hunting, and his target was this group of penguins. I lay in the group of penguins, surrounded by many penguins, and gave my target a fatal blow. That was my most difficult mission. Everything deviated from the initial plan, but at that moment, everything returned to the right track. Zhang Tianyi felt that it was unbelievable that Kelly had completed the mission in such an unimaginable way. Everything deviated from the original plan, but everything returned to the right track inexplicably. It was hard to imagine how Kelly had survived 6 days. Not a bad story. Jiang Tianyi hadn't heard any flaws yet, so he felt that the story was quite good. Kelly's handling of the details was also very good. It was thrilling, exciting, and unbelievable. Right, I was 14 that year. Jiang Tianyi sucked in a cold breath. Even Wendy, who had been expressionless, couldn't help but look askance. After that, every 2 years I would return to that group of penguins and spend a few days with them. It was also that experience that made me become an animal protector. Kelly paused and continued. That was my most difficult mission. Next, I'm going to talk about the strangest assassination target. Of course, he wasn't the mission target, but he got in my way. As an assassin, Kelly didn't think there was anything wrong with that. Her tone even made Jiang Tianyi feel that it was only natural. After a few encounters, I found out that he was just a normal person, an illegal doctor. Then, one hazy morning, I shot his head with a sniper rifle. I could clearly see the blood splattering on the wall, and the image of flesh and blood flying everywhere. When I calmly packed up my things and left, he appeared in my sight again. But this time, he appeared directly before me, and accompanying him was a monster. Jiang Tianyi raised his eyebrows. Let me guess, that illegal doctor, is he a Chinese? Chapter 2242. Kelly suddenly turned her head to look at Jiang Tianyi. Qin Zhao? Jiang Tianyi asked. When Kelly mentioned the illegal doctor, Jiang Tianyi immediately thought of Qin Zhao. You actually survived his attack. That's really surprising. Jiang Tianyi didn't know that Qin Zhao had been a normal person in the past. He naturally thought that Qin Zhao had been this strong in the past. That was why he was astonished that Kelly had managed to survive Qin Zhao's attack. He's very strong, right? All the monsters here together aren't enough for him, Jiang Tianyi said. Wendy couldn't help but glance at Jiang Tianyi. As the manager here, he was also the person in charge. He'd created all the monsters here. Of course, he knew clearly how many monsters there were and how strong they were. But Jiang Tianyi said that all the monsters here together weren't enough for one person? In Wendy's eyes, other than himself, only Jiang Tianyi and 23rd Blood Mary could break the rules he'd set up. They were the least likely to break the rules. But now, he heard that there was someone here who could easily break the rules he'd set up. Wendy was especially concerned about this. In his plans and designs, he couldn't tolerate the existence of people outside of his plans. Suddenly, Wendy thought of something and looked at Jiang Tianyi. He'd said it for him to hear. Wendy was not a fool. Although he usually looked sloppy, he was not a fool. In fact, the most basic requirement to become an alchemist was to be quick-witted. Plus, Wendy was the world's top alchemist. Is he really that strong? Kelly asked, surprised. She thought that Qin Zhao was about the same level as Zoma Dennis, or a little stronger. But from Jiang Tianyi's words, Qin Zhao was much stronger than she'd imagined. At least, Zoma Dennis couldn't even beat the monsters from before. But from Jiang Tianyi's words, Qin Zhao seemed to be unbelievably strong. All the monsters here together couldn't beat Qin Zhao. How's he compared to you? He's not as strong as me. Jiang Tianyi's answer wasn't out of Wendy's expectations. In fact, it was natural. But Jiang Tianyi's next words made Wendy incredulous. But I can't do anything to him, just like he can't do anything to me. When did such an expert appear in the otherworldly realm? I didn't know that, Wendy asked in surprise. However, he didn't think that person could really be compared to Jiang Tianyi. Although Jiang Tianyi was publicly recognized as the #1 expert in the spirit world, there were still many opponents in the spirit world that he was helpless against. Most of the time, it was because the other party had some kind of special magic. How many people like you are there in the spirit world? On the surface, I am the strongest among the humans, Jiang Tianyi said with a smile. Then he and you are tied for first place? He's not ranked. Then why? Ranking doesn't represent strength, and fame doesn't represent strength either. I've said it before, I'm the strongest on the surface, but I'm not the real strongest. There are many monsters in this world that you can't understand, and he's one of them. Even in existence like you calls him a monster? To a certain extent, he is indeed a monstrous existence. At this moment, Wendy suddenly stopped. Celestial Master Zhang, there are a large number of people gathered in Iviton Square. They seem to be attracted by something. I don't remember arranging any important props there. Should we go and take a look? Then let's go and take a look. Zhang Tianyi nodded. Kelly followed Zhang Tianyi, chatting and laughing along the way. However, Kelly had always paid attention to her tone. At the very least, she had to make sure that she wouldn't arouse Zhang Tianyi's displeasure. Kelly also noticed at the same time. Although Wendy didn't say more than 3 sentences the whole time, he wasn't Zhang Tianyi's follower. The two of them should be of the same status or generation. So when Kelly talked, she tried to avoid the topic of Wendy. Kelly vaguely heard that Zhang Tianyi and Wendy were the people in charge here. And now that they were heading to the scene of the incident, they didn't seem to be in a hurry at all. They walked at a steady pace along the way. After about half an hour, they finally saw Iviton Square. There were many people standing in the square. These people were dressed differently, and they didn't look like ordinary people. However, they all seemed to be standing there in a daze. There was no sound, no fighting, and they all faced the same direction. There were hundreds of people in the huge square. But there was no sound at all. This strange scene made Kelly's hair stand on end. This was not a good sign. Kelly swallowed and asked, "They're not all dead, are they?" Wendy frowned. "Celestial Master Zhang, what do you think?" "They're not dead, but their consciousness seems to have disappeared. There should be a boundary in front. As long as you step into the boundary, your consciousness will enter a space of consciousness. Right now, the consciousness of these children should be fighting in a certain space of consciousness. Don't you know there's a boundary here?" "I don't know." Wendy's expression was very ugly. Zhang Tianyi's tone sounded more like he was blaming him. Everything here was set up by him. But now there was such a huge boundary here, and he didn't know anything about it. This was a serious dereliction of duty. What do we do now? There are 2 ways. One is to enter the space of consciousness and defeat him inside. The other is to find the host of the space outside. He should be hiding in the crowd. Zhang Tianyi said. There were hundreds of spiritualists in front of them, and everyone's aura was mixed together. And in a situation where the target was not clear, if they couldn't distinguish the difference, it would be very difficult to find the target they were looking for. "Can you tell me what's the situation now?" Kelly asked. "There's someone here. Through a magic array, he's pulling everyone's consciousness into his sea of consciousness. That means if we find that person, we can save everyone's consciousness, is that so?" "Yes." Zhang Tianyi nodded. "But this is also the problem. That person is undoubtedly hiding in the crowd. How do we find him? Don't you have any magic to find him? Even if it's directional magic, there needs to be characteristics. There's no way to find him without knowing any characteristics." Kelly also fell into thought. If she could help here, there was no doubt that her life would be safer. Chapter 2243. Kelly looked at the hundreds of people in front of her. These people were people she couldn't reach in the past. But now, they stood rooted to the ground like wooden statues. Kelly opened her legs and was about to walk forward. Zhang Tianyi suddenly stopped her. "If you go in, your consciousness will be sucked into the space." "I can't go in," Kelly said with some disappointment. "Why are you going in?" Kelly thought for a moment and said, "Among the hundreds of people here, only one person is conscious, right?" "That's right." Zhang Tianyi nodded. "I've studied the breathing rates of people who are really asleep and those who are pretending to be asleep. They are different," Kelly said. "Although they are not sleeping, their bodies should have similar reactions." Zhang Tianyi smiled. "Wendy, do you have a solution?" "Yes, a simple shielding matrix can isolate her from the magic matrix." Kelly thought it would be a complicated process. But Wendy just gestured in front of her. Then, a small circle of light entered his forehead. "Is it okay now?" "Yes, you can go in without worry." Wendy said. Kelly carefully took the first step. She didn't feel anything strange. Of course, she didn't know what would happen if something happened. But now, she was just taking a stroll. Zhang Tianyi was also next to Kelly. Kelly looked a little doubtful. But she quickly understood Zhang Tianyi's intention. Distinguish carefully. Take your time. There's no rush, Zhang Tianyi said calmly. Kelly would stop for a few seconds every time she walked past someone. Her pace was very steady. Zhang Tianyi kept talking. Suddenly, Kelly and Zhang Tianyi stopped at the same time. Kelly and Zhang Tianyi both had victorious smiles on their faces. In an instant, everyone woke up. At the same time, the person standing in front of Kelly and Zhang Tianyi suddenly entered the crowd. But the next moment, Zhang Tianyi waved one arm and the crowd was violently pushed away. With another pull, the person was directly pulled back in front of Zhang Tianyi. Kelly knew Zhang Tianyi was very powerful. But she still found it unbelievable that he was using such a trick in front of her. Zhang Tianyi was able to catch him from a distance of more than 10 meters. No matter how one looked at it, this method seemed magical. The spiritualists who had just woken up had yet to see Zhang Tianyi clearly, or rather, they did not know him. But they all recognized the person in Zhang Tianyi's hand. Everyone's faces were filled with righteous indignation, and they rushed forward, wanting to snatch or attack. Get lost, Zhang Tianyi said in a low voice. In an instant, Kelly felt a wave of chi spreading from Zhang Tianyi's body. Then, the people around him all fell over. Damn old man! Who are you? Someone got up and pointed at Zhang Tianyi while cursing. As soon as the man finished speaking, the person beside him covered his mouth and forcefully pulled him away from Zhang Tianyi. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Zhang Tianyi was supreme in the spirit world. Celestial Master! At this moment, a spiritualist cupped his fists and bowed to Zhang Tianyi. Celestial Master! The sound quickly spread throughout the square. No matter how arrogant he was, he didn't dare to provoke Zhang Tianyi. Arrogance depended on who you were dealing with. Those who were arrogant in front of Zhang Tianyi, even if Zhang Tianyi didn't cause trouble for them, their elders would. Step down. Zhang Tianyi still had that arrogant attitude. Yes, Celestial Master. Everyone dispersed in an uproar. Even though these people were still angry because their consciousness had been imprisoned. But Zhang Tianyi's orders had to be obeyed. Right now, Zhang Tianyi was more or less the leader of the martial arts circle in the spirit world. Before long, all the spiritualists had left. Not a single one was left. Zhang Tianyi directly threw that person to the ground. That person lay on the ground, looking left and right, as if he still hadn't given up. Wendy walked over. You can't run. You should know who you're facing. That person's gaze finally fell on Zhang Tianyi, and he took a deep breath. Celestial Master, ask whatever you want to ask. I'll definitely tell you everything I know. Kelly revealed a surprised expression once again, but then felt that it was only natural. What's your name? Lippard. Of course, you can also call me Nightmare. Nightmare? The 7th of the 10 villains, Nightmare? Wendy looked at Lippard in surprise. I feel extremely honored to have Mr. Wendy remember my name. I also know your name. Shouldn't you feel even more honored? Zhang Tianyi asked with a smile. Lippard laughed bitterly. But I can't feel happy right now. No matter who it was, being Zhang Tianyi's enemy and being caught red-handed by him wouldn't feel happy. Although Leopard was a famous figure in the spirit world, and he had stirred up quite a storm, he was not a small figure. But facing Zhang Tianyi, he still couldn't muster the slightest bit of resistance. Just like what happened to Zoma Dennis. He wanted nothing more than to pull out all his trump cards for Zhang Tianyi to see. Actually, they were all smart people. Zhang Tianyi wasn't just famous. He had methods that were even more terrifying than his reputation. There was no point in hiding in front of him. Sooner or later, he would find out. Why make himself suffer a bit more? Don't tell me that you came here on your own to kill time. Tell me your goal and the organization behind you. I was hired this time. The person who hired me is also one of the 10 villains, Quicksilver. What does he want you to do? Create chaos, Lippert said. I understand now. His goal isn't for me to create chaos, but for me to attract your attention, Celestial Master. At this point, Lippert felt dejected. After all, being used as a chess piece wasn't something that anyone would feel happy about. Moreover, he was a one-time use chess piece. After using it, he would be thrown away. That Quicksilver is also in the wasteland market? I don't know, Lippert replied helplessly. How do you communicate with him? I can't tell you. I've never seen Quicksilver, and I don't know what he looks like. I don't even know his gender. Zhang Tianyi didn't doubt Lippert's answer. It was very likely that what he said was true. If the spiritualists wanted to hide their identity, there were too many ways to do so. I don't know what Quicksilver wants either, Lippert said. Then what else can you tell me? Not long ago, I saw the leader of the 10 villains, Sickle, in a hotel in Istanbul. I don't know if his appearance here has anything to do with Quicksilver. Chapter 2244. The 10 villains weren't directly related to each other. It was more like a ranking. Of course, the 10 villains weren't just a ranking. More often than not, they represented the darkest part of an era. The so-called cults, thugs, and villains couldn't be compared to them at all. Between the 1980s and the millennium of the last century. Because of the conflicts between spiritualists from different countries, the situation in the spiritual world was somewhat unstable. Because of the unstable situation, the 10 evil and powerful spiritualists took advantage of the chaos to create terror and disasters one after another. They didn't have any obvious religious leanings, goals, or grudges. It was as if the 10 villains were born to do evil. Of course, not everyone in this world was a human. For example, Cui Xin was a dragon. She was ranked 4th among the 10 villains. Her code name was Calamity. She was a racist among the dragons. She firmly believed that dragons were supreme. To her, humans were all ants. The dragon clan was supposed to be supreme. She enjoyed slaughtering humans. If she was judged according to human law, even her long lifespan wouldn't be enough. Then she met 2 humans who changed her dragon life. One was Qin Zhao, a man who pressed her against the ground and rubbed her. The other was Zhang Tianyi. She was also pressed against the ground and rubbed against by Zhang Tianyi. Perhaps her beliefs hadn't changed, but her habits had. Among the 10 evildoers, the Scythe was the most terrifying. The name obviously represented the Grim Reaper's scythe. He was the last to receive the title, but the crimes he'd committed were incomparable to the other 9. He was also active in the 1980s, but he couldn't compare to the other villains. Until 1994, when a shocking massacre took place in Africa. Millions of people were killed. The massacre of more than 1 million people in modern times was unparalleled in terms of bloodshed and terror. At first, other countries thought that it was caused by the conflict between the colonists and the 2 tribes involved. But in an accident, someone suddenly realized that it was Sickle's doing. Perhaps Sickle hadn't personally killed more than 1 million people. But he was the mastermind behind the scenes. Then someone realized that he wasn't just the mastermind. He was also involved in many old cases in the 1980s. There were at least dozens of tragic cases, and at most hundreds and thousands of people massacred, all of which were inextricably linked to the Sickle. In an era where the entire society of every country was developing towards the direction of modern civilization, let alone a massacre of hundreds or thousands of people, even a massacre of a few dozen people would cause a global shock. No one knew his purpose. It seemed that he was just killing for the sake of killing. He was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, reaping lives in a frenzy. Moreover, he had always been hiding behind the scenes, hidden in the shadows. Even among the 10 evildoers, only a handful of people recognized the scythe. Rippert was one of them. When he heard that scythe was coming to Istanbul, even Zhang Tianyi frowned. This was the first time he had shown such worry in this battle of holy glory. Previously, he had heard that the hidden cultivators sect was causing trouble in this battle of the holy glorious ones. Zhang Tianyi didn't think there was any problem. Every time the battle of holy glory was held, there would always be people causing trouble. The hermit order causing trouble was a daily occurrence in the battle of the Holy Glorious Ones. He was in charge of such matters. If there was a time when nothing happened, Zhang Tianyi wouldn't be able to get used to it. But Scythe was different. No matter how much trouble the hermit order caused, they always had a very clear goal in mind. But Scythe's goal was very simple, which was a bloody massacre. Perhaps there was an even deeper conspiracy behind the massacre. But everyone would only see a massacre. "What does he look like?" Zhang Tianyi asked. "It's useless, looks mean nothing to someone like him. If he wanted to change his appearance, he could easily change into the appearance of 3 people in a single day. Furthermore, when I saw him the other day, he was wearing a human skin mask. I only remembered his aura. Is there any other useful information?" Rippard lowered his head and thought for a while, then replied, "There is, but I want to use this information to exchange for my freedom. That depends on whether or not the information you provide is worth it. Sir Wendy's assistant, Nancy, is with Quicksilver, and I have a way to find her." This time, it was Wendy's turn to lose his cool. No one likes to be betrayed. And Wendy liked it even less. Not to mention that he had been deceived by Nancy for several years. The more he trusted Nancy in the past, the more furious he was right now. "Is this information enough to exchange for my freedom?" Zhang Tianyi took a step back. Wendy's attitude would decide whether or not Rippard's freedom would be granted. Even though both of them had the right to punish Rippard. However, Zhang Tianyi still decided to respect Wendy's decision. "How did you find Nancy?" Wendy's tone was a bit doubtful. Even though he was furious at Nancy's betrayal, he understood Nancy very well. But he knew Anand. Anand had been by his side for so many years. And he couldn't even find a single clue about her. In the end, before she left, she even destroyed Wendy's laboratory. She destroyed all traces of her past. The meticulousness of this woman's thoughts was terrifying. Because of this, he couldn't help but suspect that Rippard had purposely said this in order to free himself. "Yesterday, I met her once." At the time, she was wearing a stained white robe, and as luck would have it, I picked up the white robe that she threw away. Wendy immediately understood why Rippard was so confident. A white robe that Nancy had worn was like a navigator for spiritualists. From the smell of the robe to the dandruff on it, and even the karmic connection attached to the robe, they could all find Nancy. As long as the robe really belonged to Nancy, and as long as she had worn it, then whether it was Wendy or Zhang Tianyi, they would both have a way to find Nancy through this robe. "If you really help me find Nancy, then I'll let you go," Wendy said. "Thank you, Mr. Wendy." Rippard looked at Zhang Tianyi again. Zhang Tianyi said indifferently, "Wendy's decision is my decision." Rippard took out a white robe. The moment Wendy saw it, he recognized it. It was the robe that Nancy had worn. Because he had given it to Nancy, there were still many stains left on it from the experiments that Nancy had been in charge of over the years. Wendy grabbed the white robe and held it tightly in his hand. One could imagine how angry Wendy was right now. Divine Emperor of the 9 Heavens. Chapter 2245. What's the relationship between Mr. Wendy and Nancy? Kelly asked in a low voice. Although her voice was very low, Wendy still heard it. Wendy said with a livid face, "Enemies." Kelly didn't dare to ask any more. Obviously, Wendy's hatred for Nancy had reached its peak. Suddenly, a green beam of light appeared in the distance. The green beam of light shot up into the sky. Everyone in the barren land bazaar saw the beam of light. Zhang Tianyi looked at Wendy. "Do you know what's going on over there?" "I don't know. I didn't set it up," Wendy said with a frown. "I feel the spiritual energy in the barren land bazaar is rising again," Zhang Tianyi said. "It seems to be the same as that mausoleum. Maybe Nancy is over there. Then let's go and take a look." It was the first time Kelly and Evelyn had seen such a supernatural scene. Naturally, the shock in his heart could not be any greater. In fact, even for people in the spiritual world, such a shocking scene was rare. That's nothing's sevenfold door? Someone broke into the core area of the array I and activated the final checkpoint. AI Nancy looked surprised. Who is it? Is it teacher Wendy? It's not Wendy. According to the latest information I received, Wendy and Celestial Master Zhang just appeared in Yveton Square not long ago. They've already captured the chess piece we placed there. Chess piece? If Lippard heard you call him a chess piece, he'll probably go crazy. If it's not Wendy, it only means that the participants of this year's Battle of Holy Glory are unexpectedly strong. That's right. Initially, I thought that we would have to do our best to lure Wen to the 7 stacks door. Only he would be able to pass the trial of the 7 stacks door. I never thought that someone would be able to pass the trial of the 6 stacks door without anyone noticing. But I'm afraid Wendy has to be the one at 7-fold door, AI Nancy said. AI Nancy had been Wendy's assistant for so many years. She knew Wendy's strength too well, especially his understanding of alchemy and arrays. He deserved to be the best in the world. There were many excellent alchemists in the world, but there was only one genius alchemist, and only Wendy could be called a genius. Over the years, AI Nancy had witnessed how Wendy had created miracles in the field of alchemy. Back then, in order to secretly learn Wendy's alchemy, Nancy had stayed by his side. But the longer she stayed with Wend, the more she realized her ignorance and stupidity. The difference between the two was too great, or it could be said that their way of thinking was different. Especially when she understood that what she wanted to learn was not something she could learn. Only then did she truly realize how big the gap between her and Wenda was. In terms of alchemy and magic circles, she would always be a primary school student in front of Wenda. Wend, on the other hand, was always making progress. It seemed that all complex technologies would become simple in front of him. Must it be Winder? The black soul hovered around AI Nancy. He did not know alchemy, so of course, he could not understand AI Nancy's tone of certainty and conviction. Because the 7th layer is the Earth test. In the 7th layer, there will be an endless stream of clay armies. They will never end. To stop this process, the only way is to solve a super complicated alchemy formula in the shortest time possible. When this alchemy formula is solved, it will automatically release the ultimate Earth magic, Earth's Forbidden, which will disintegrate the endless clay armies. At the same time, it will also disintegrate the seal hidden behind the 7th layer. As long as more people go to help the alchemists resist the clay armies, and then give the alchemists enough time, they should be able to solve the alchemy formula you mentioned. In theory, yes, but you have ignored 2 problems. First, that super complicated alchemy formula. There are no more than 3 people in the world who can solve it, and one of them is Wendy. Second, how long do you think you can help the alchemists resist? And you know nothing about the clay armies. Are you looking down on our strength? The black soul said with dissatisfaction. Don't overestimate your strength. AI Nancy did not give the black soul face. That's one of the ancient seals. If it's really as simple as you say, I'm afraid we don't need to worry about it now. I'm not looking down on it, but I don't think it's that difficult. The black soul still proudly said. Then we'll wait and see. The Wutai Mountain team and the Union of 10,000 Immortals team had been here for 2 days. In these 2 days, the 2 teams of 20 people fully understood their powerlessness. In addition to being able to superimpose their magical power, and then greatly improve the strength of one of them, they had no other use. Most of the trouble still needed to be solved by Ruik Des. In 2 days, they had broken through 6 gates. And when they came to the 7th gate, what they saw was a square obelisk standing in the middle of the square. A ray of light shot out from the top of the obelisk, which went straight through the sky. Between the 7th door and the obelisk was an invisible wall of air. But everyone could still perceive the existence of the air wall. It was similar to the buggy terrain in a game. There was obviously nothing, but they just couldn't get through. Everyone carefully approached the obelisk. Just then, a line of magic text suddenly appeared on the surface of the obelisk. For people who did not know alchemy, these magic texts were obscure and difficult to understand. But for people who knew alchemy, these magic texts were very, very complicated formulas. Apathy formula! When Ruik Des saw this line of text, he frowned directly. What is apathy formula? For you laymen, there's no need to know what apathy formula is. Mr. Ruik, we need to cooperate sincerely, not with this condescending attitude. Exquisite said indignantly. Cooperation? Have you made a move along the way? How many times have you sold it? You have the nerve to say that you have a cooperative relationship with us? Ruik Des's words directly made the two teams of 20 people lose face. Although everyone was filled with righteous indignation, they did not contribute much in the first 6 gates. Although they had the heart to contribute to the 7th gate, the situation was the same as before. They could not even understand the magic formula given by this gate, let alone contribute. Ruik Des ignored the crowd and began to turn his head to look at the apathy formula. There seems to be no real difficulty in this permutation of the apathy formula. Will this gate be easier than before? Chapter 2246. Everyone looked at Ruik Des. Ruik Des carefully observed the apathy formula in front of him. Then, Ruik Des felt that he had understood and solved the apathy formula. Ruik Des placed his palms on the outer wall of the obelisk. He sent magic power into the obelisk and a wisp of consciousness at the same time. The apathy formula, which was displayed in light and shadow, suddenly changed. Ruik Des's solution to the formula appeared in the light and shadow. Of course, this was only the first step. Just then, the obelisk released a wave of magic power. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. The ground around them started protruding. Clay men stood up from the mounds. When everyone saw the clay men, they heaved a sigh of relief. There were a lot of clay men, but they were very weak, very, very weak. Faging punched and 7 or 8 clay men were crushed. They're too weak. I didn't even use any strength. Faging waved the clay in his fist. They're too weak. I didn't even use any strength. Faging waved the clay in his fist. Indeed. Tinkle casually threw out a spell and dozens of clay men were smashed into pieces. Of course, their attacks and the clay men they destroyed were just a drop in the ocean compared to the densely packed clay men. However, any one of these clay men could destroy an entire army. The most efficient was the rat demon, Wei Dahing. He summoned thousands of rats and wiped out hundreds of clay men with a single sweep. This is so fun. I feel like I'm invincible, Wei Dahing exclaimed. After all, in most situations, they couldn't fight against 100 alone. Even if they faced 100 ordinary people, they might not win. However, the clay men were much weaker than ordinary people. Very, very weak. Even if one person faced an army of thousands, they could easily deal with it. These clay men are too weak. Chen Zhao and Baifla were hiding in the dark and watching the show. Baifla crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked coldly at the chaotic battlefield. It definitely won't be that easy. The previous 6 levels weren't easy at all, and they were gradually increasing in difficulty. No matter how you look at it, the 7th level will definitely be more difficult than the previous 6. It's impossible for it to be the easiest. Baifla's gaze landed on Ruik Des. Ruik Des was immersed in the process of deciphering the apathy formula. It was as if the battle around him had nothing to do with him. He just needed to focus on the work in front of him. In fact, he had already negotiated with the team from Watai Mountain and the team from the Union of 10,000 Immortals. He could put in more effort, but if he needed to deal with it wholeheartedly, both teams had to be responsible for Madoue Shinji's safety. Although Madoue Shinji kept saying that she could protect herself, she didn't care. In fact, everyone knew that Madoue Shinji was far from being able to protect herself. At least in most situations, she was the one who needed to be protected. Although her stamina and physique had already surpassed ordinary people, she still hadn't reached the combat power of a spiritualist. Furthermore, her combat experience was pitifully low. At this moment, Madoue Shinji was indeed under everyone's protection. She didn't even have the chance to participate in the battle. Even when facing these extremely weak clay people, she didn't have the chance to attack. There was another person following her. As long as she got a little closer to the front line, she would be pulled back. After thinking for a few minutes, Ruik wrote down the second step of the solution. The moment he wrote down the second step of the solution, the obelisk once again released a magical fluctuation. Then, the clay people around him suddenly became stronger. These clay people were taller, and their speed and strength had increased. Oh no, this is the wrong step! Ruik Des suddenly realized. He also noticed a change in the clay people around him. So that was it. If his solution was wrong, the strength of the clay people would increase. The team from Wutai Mountain and the Union of 10,000 Immortals also realized this. Mr. Ruik, don't make a mistake. Although the strength of these clay people is not strong, there are too many of them. You don't need to talk too much. Just do your job. Ruik Des responded with a cold face. However, he still calmed himself down and started to deduce the formula more seriously. He tried again to modify the formula. At this time, the obelisk changed the strength of the clay people again. He had become even more powerful. These clay people actually became stronger. How is this possible? I didn't make a mistake. How could? Ruik Des was a little panicked. Mr. Ruik, don't disturb me! Ruik Des roared. Qin Zhao and Bifla were both surprised that the usually calm Ruik Des would be furious now. He looks like he's losing control of his emotions. Rationality requires self-control, Bifla said calmly. When people are highly focused, they forget to control their emotions. Is the step he solved wrong? I know alchemy, but I'm not very good at it. The Apathy formula is not something I can understand. Haven't you lived for more than 400 years? That's not enough time for you to learn? Alchemy is a system that requires a lot of talent. I happen to have no talent in this area, and the alchemy I know is inherited from a student of mine, Bifla said calmly. Moreover, do you really think that 400 years is a long time? I only have a few times more knowledge than a normal person. There are still many things in this world that I don't know. Qin Zhao thought about it, and it seemed to be true. It seemed like 400 years was an eternity. In reality, it wasn't. It was impossible for a person to keep learning for 400 years. For example, a normal person only had a dozen or so years to learn. Compared to a normal person, it was only a few times more. It's rare that there's something you don't know. How rare? Bifla snorted, ignoring Qin Zhao's mockery. Just then, the situation on the battlefield became even more chaotic. As Ruik Des solved the next step, the clay people became stronger again. Of course, because the clay people's bottom line was too low, they were still weak even after 2 or 3 times stronger. Although the two teams felt pressured, it was far from enough to threaten their lives. This level doesn't seem so simple. Whether Ruik Des' solution is right or wrong, it will increase the clay people's strength. Chapter 2247. Bifla wasn't the only one who understood now. Ruik Des understood as well. He was very sure that other than the first mistake, he hadn't made any mistakes in the following 2 times. But the clay man had still been strengthened. The only difference was the strength of the increase. Ruik Des thought deeply for a while and completely understood where the difficulty of this checkpoint was. The difficulty wasn't in the Apathy formula itself. It was in the speed and slowness of the solution. If he solved the problem with the least number of steps, he could pass the level in the shortest way. The longer he took, the more dangerous it would be. This was why Luke Des had to rethink his method of solving the problem. He was confident that with his abilities, solving the Apathy formula wouldn't be difficult. But how could he solve it in the shortest and easiest way? That was where the real difficulty lay. According to Luke Des' original plan, he could solve the formula in the safest way. But it would take around 6 hours. What exactly is the Apathy formula? Qin Zhao asked, confused. Why can't I solve it in one go after figuring out the complete solution? Do we have to solve it step by step? Qin Zhao asked, confused. Apathy is the name of a person. He was an alchemist about 2,300 years ago, Bifla said. Bifla said. The spiritualists of that era focused on longevity. It was the same in both the East and the West. Apicius was one of those who pursued longevity. Later, he discovered a method to extend one's lifespan. This method was the Apicius formula. Chen Zhao was instantly interested. Extend one's life? He'd done research on it before. But the final result wasn't as he'd hoped. In the spiritual world, many people have actually used the Apicius formula to calculate the results. Most of the older generation of spiritualists who have lived for more than 100 years have used the Apicius formula to calculate the results. Since it's a public magic formula and there's already a result, there shouldn't be any difficulty, right? Qin Zhao didn't understand why there was a need to recalculate. He thought that he had found the key to life, but then he discovered a big problem. His experiments on himself were successful, but his experiments on the second and third people always ended in failure. He couldn't understand why the correct calculation results couldn't be used on other people. It wasn't until his later years that he figured out the reason. It was because of the differences between people. To put it simply, everyone's data was different, but the formula he invented was the result of careful calculation. That was why his experiments on himself were always successful, but his experiments on others were always failures. Later, after he improved the formula and added the personal data of the target, it became the real Apicius formula. That is to say, the Apicius formula will be very different for different targets. Even twins will be different if their data are added to the Apicius formula, so the calculation results will be different. Moreover, the calculation and solution are very complicated, so he had to solve the problem step by step. Rooker was also very hesitant. Recalculate? Think of new steps to solve the problem? Then all his previous efforts would be in vain. Moreover, these clay men would continue to strengthen. However, if he didn't recalculate and continued to use the previous method, the clay men would become stronger. Every step would make the clay men stronger, and the two teams would eventually collapse. After hesitating for a while, Rooker finally made up his mind and recalculated. Damn, they'd become stronger again. Mr. Rooker. By now, these clay men were already as strong as ordinary people. Moreover, there was an endless number of them. No matter how many the two teams killed, they would always stand up again. There would only be more of them. Moreover, even if Rooker didn't do anything, they would slowly become stronger. The two teams were no longer able to deal with the clay men as they did in the beginning, chatting merrily. You're saying that many people in the spiritual world have used this Apicius formula? How much lifespan can this Apicius formula increase? Not necessarily. Everyone's data is different, so the results are also different. However, most people who use the Apicius formula get an increase in lifespan of between 1 to 20 years. Can ordinary people use it? No, I can't. One of the most basic requirements of the Apicius formula is magic power. Qin Zhao was somewhat disappointed, but potions made from perfect demonic crystals also had the effect of increasing lifespan. Moreover, the potion could be used on ordinary people. Of course, it wasn't clear how much lifespan the perfect potion could increase. After all, spiritualists could use many magical methods, such as fortune-telling or prophecy, to find out where their life would end. But ordinary people didn't have that many methods. At least, the current medical technology wasn't at this level yet. You've used the Apicius formula before? Yes, I used it in my third life. At that time, I asked the best alchemist in Europe to help me calculate my Apicius formula. That alchemist used 4 days to calculate the correct result. You said that the best alchemist used 4 days? How long do you think Rooker will need? I don't think they can last more than 4 days. In the spiritual world, all of magic is actually regressing, while alchemy magic is constantly improving. The entire magic system is constructed under the influence of the spirit energy tide of the entire world. It's just like the high tide and the low tide. During the high tide, magic civilization will flourish, and during the low tide, magic civilization will show signs of regression. However, alchemy magic is different. Alchemy magic relies more on technology and genius alchemists that appear in certain times. As long as the results of their research aren't lost, the level of alchemy will continue to improve. You're saying that the spiritual energy tide is at a low tide now. How long will it last? The spiritual energy tide usually rises and falls every 500 years. It's been about 300 years since the peak of the last tide. In other words, we'll have to wait another 200 years to feel the next spiritual energy tide. Why don't I feel anything special? Of course. You grew up in a spiritual energy environment during the low tide. What do you feel? You're like a kid from a slum. He'll never know how rich the rich are. Chapter 2248. Ruik Des continued to solve the problem. The pressure on the Wutai Mountain team and the Union of 10,000 Immortals team was getting greater and greater. Up until now, the strength of the Clay Army had exceeded the equilibrium line of ordinary people. This also meant that the line of defense formed by the two teams was heading towards collapse. Now, their attacks could no longer be as powerful as before, where they could casually destroy dozens of enemies with a single blow. Now, it was very difficult to destroy even a few of them at once. They needed to use more powerful magic power. Although Ruik Des was fully immersed in the process of solving the problem, he was not able to do so. However, he was also observing the situation at the scene. Ma Duo used the potion. As Ruik Des continued to solve the problem, he called out to Mado Shinji. Number 4, the green potion. Madwa lifted the corner of her clothes. There was an ammunition belt hanging inside, and a bottle of potion was stuffed in each ammunition slot. It was something Ruik Des had given her to protect herself. The potions were numbered so that Madwa Shinji could identify and use them. Madwa took out the number 4 green potion and drank it. Madwa Shinji's skin began to turn dark green. Madwa Shinji suddenly moved, her speed more than 10 times faster than before. Even the teams from Wutai Mountain and the Union of 10,000 Immortals were surprised. They all knew that Madwa Shinji was just an ordinary person. At least they didn't find any magic in Mado Shinji. Just by relying on that potion, he was able to unleash such an astonishing speed. Madwa Shinji took advantage of her speed and agilely moved through the Clay Army. She didn't have a lot of combat experience. In fact, it could even be said that she lacked it. However, she had been cramming some combat skills recently. Although it wasn't much of an improvement, it would still be of some use here. Of course, this was completely improved by potions. In the end, it would still return to Madwa Shinji's body. Therefore, these medicines all had side effects. Of course, the side effects of this potion were not that great. At least it wasn't too dangerous for Mado Shinji. Just to overload her body a little. After the effects of the drug wore off, there would be a certain degree of fatigue. Madwa Shinji's combat power was limited, so even if she joined the battle, it would not affect the overall situation much. Ruik Des became even more serious about solving the Apocy formula. However, as he increased his speed, the Clay Man's strength also increased rapidly. The situation seems out of control, Chen Zhao said. What about us? Just watch. Bifula looked at Chen Zhao. If there's a big problem sealed behind this level, Chen Zhao said. If we act now, it means that we're personally releasing the big problem. So you're just going to watch them die? You should know that we encourage them to come here, Bifula said. B. He was surprised that Bifula. B. He was just surprised that Bifula would have such emotions. Qin Zhao followed Bifula's gaze and realized that he was looking at Madwa Shinji. So you feel guilty because of Mado Shinji. Madwa is Qin. Star. API 1000. 10 I'm Madwa 1,000 people. Comma. 1,000 Qin 1,000. Even though I have extraordinary power now, I'm still a human in essence. Don't forget, so are you. Therefore, human emotions should appear in you and me, and not look down on all living beings from above. Qin Zhao could not help but be surprised by Bifula's words. In the past, Qin Zhao had the thought that Qin Zhao was an ant. But now, he had passed that period. What surprised Chen Zhao was Bifula's current attitude. Bifula had been so proud, even arrogant. But at this moment, he had a few more human emotions. Fine, you're right. Chen Zhao shrugged. Are you going to attack? Bifula answered Chen Zhao's question with action. Bifula's sudden appearance in the middle of the battlefield shocked everyone. Even Ruik Des had to divert his attention and put more of his attention on Bifula. He didn't understand why Bifula, who had been hiding, would appear. And where was Chen Zhao now? What was their goal? But then, Chen Zhao appeared beside Bifula. All of you back off, Bifula said. Hearing this, the Wutai Mountain team and the alliance of 10,000 immortals were overjoyed. Only Madwa 10,000 immortals was still suspicious. After all, in her eyes, Chen Zhao and Bifula were still traitors. Bifula didn't care about Madwa 10,000 immortals' thoughts. He waved his hand casually. A wave of fire rolled up in front of him, and the fire wave swept outwards. In the blink of an eye, the wave of fire spread across the entire battlefield. Countless clay people were instantly burned into ceramics. Like a large terracotta army, they were all frozen in place. Ruik Des sucked in a cold breath. Such powerful magic! Look at how he cast it. It didn't take any effort at all. It was like a casual attack. This kind of attack was too terrifying. At least, Ruik Des knew that if it were him, he definitely wouldn't be able to do it so easily. If he used all of his magic power, he might just be able to release this attack. You should focus more, Bifula reminded him. Ruik Des snorted coldly and looked away. But his mouth was still unforgiving. I won't leave my back to two traitors, he said. Madwa 10,000 immortals watched Bifula's shocking attack. She was overwhelmed with emotions. She had never wanted power so much. To have such unparalleled power. But she knew very well. With her current strength, she couldn't compare to Bifula and Chen Zhao. Even every member of the Wutai Mountain team and the alliance of 10,000 immortals was stronger than her. Cracks gradually appeared on the bodies of the clay men that had been baked into ceramics. Then, new and stronger clay men walked out of the cracks one by one. As expected, they can't be killed. Bifula shrugged. Although the clay people's strength had been strengthened, they were still facing Bifula. They were still no different from the original clay people. A ball of azure flame rose from Bifula's fingertip. He casually tossed it out. In an instant, the azure flame started bouncing within the clay man. As long as the clay men were touched by the azure flames, they would instantly collapse. Moreover, the blue flame bounced very quickly. In the blink of an eye, the reborn clay people returned to dust. Chapter 2249. As expected, the clay men army stood up again. Their strength had also been further strengthened. However, this degree of strengthening still could not make Bifula use a second move. However, Bifula obviously did not intend to use the same trick again. Bifula pointed his finger, and a death ray burst out from his fingertip. However, the death ray released by Bifula was completely different from the death ray released by others. The moment the death ray released by Bifula hit the first clay man, it split into two. And after the two death rays hit the clay man, they became four. From 4 to 8, from 8, in just a few seconds, the battlefield in front of them had been formed into a dense red network by the death rays. This amazing magic effect stunned the Wutai Mountain team and the union of 10,000 immortals. Not only them, but even Ruik Des could not believe it. At this moment, he completely understood that Bifula's magic level and magic power level were far above his. Bifula made 3 moves, and all 3 moves were so shocking. If it were Ruik Des himself, he would have to use all his magic power to make these 3 moves. But for Bifula, it was as easy as lifting a finger. Ruik Des's heart skipped a beat. Then let him test the depth of his strength. Ruik Des deliberately misinterpreted the steps. The strength of the clay men army that had been revived instantly increased by several times. Bifula glanced at Ruik Des from the corner of his eye. This doesn't seem like a mistake you should make. If you think I'm not qualified, you can do it yourself, Ruik Des retorted. Bifla did not argue with Ruik Des. He stamped his foot, and the ground formed an impact that rushed toward the Clay Men army. All the Clay Men army that was affected by the impact fell apart in an instant. In just a few seconds, all the Clay Men had been killed in an instant. Ruik Des secretly marveled. At this moment, the strength of the Clay Men army was already very strong. But they were still crushed by Bifla in seconds. How strong was Bifla? And the stronger Bifla was, the more Madwa Shinji longed for power. This was her first time seeing the power and inconceivability of magic. Ruik Des was up to no good once again. However, the result was the same. Bifla was still easily defeated. Moreover, it was a new trick. Bifla's knowledge of magic and the types of magic he possessed were simply too rich. Although Ruik Des was also very knowledgeable, he was not as knowledgeable. However, compared to Bifla, there was still a gap. Bifla could spend an entire day demonstrating this playstyle to Ruik Des without repeating the same moves. Even if it was the same spell, there were 2 or more different ways of displaying it. Furthermore, there was still a limit to how much the Clay Man could strengthen himself. Nothing could be improved infinitely in this way. Even the designer and creator of this level couldn't do it, let alone these lifeless clay people. Just as Bifla had guessed, the Clay Men soon reached their limit. The strongest of these Clay Men were probably at the level of an ordinary enhanced type spirit controller. Their speed was similar to that of a normal person, but their strength was far greater than that of a normal person. Also, their defense mainly came from the rock shell they were covered with. But after Ruik Des deliberately misinterpreted the steps, the obelisk once again released a magical ripple. All Clay Men received a blessing spell. This was the extra boost they received after their strength reached its limit. Seeing that he still couldn't find out Bifla's limit, Ruik Des gave up on the idea. He had already wasted a lot of time. He didn't want to continue like this. Mado Shinji glanced at Qinzhao, who was sitting at the side and watching the show lazily. Aren't you going to help him? I can't do a flashy magic attack like his. Qinzhao really liked this kind of beautiful magic. However, Qinzhao couldn't do it himself. His attacks were all straightforward. Most of the time, they weren't worth watching. Naturally, Mado Shinji thought that Qinzhao didn't think he was as strong as Bifla. But this was understandable. Firstly, she wasn't from the spiritual world. Secondly, her knowledge of the spiritual world was still very shallow. Ruik Des sped up his problem-solving speed. The Clay Men also started receiving all sorts of blessings and enhancement spells. Finally, an hour later, Ruik Des finished the last step. Immediately, the obelisk started shaking violently and releasing magical ripples. Every time it released a magical ripple, the Clay Men would receive a blessing spell. Speed enhancement, strength enhancement, immortal blessing, damage repair, but the Clay Men still didn't stop. Damn bastard, what's going on? I've already solved the problem. The Clay Men should stop attacking. Ruik Des was a bit impatient, but he still checked it carefully from the beginning patiently. After checking again and again, Ruik Des was very sure that his solution was correct. But the Clay Men still didn't stop attacking. Right now, each Clay Man had a dozen blessing spells on them. Why can't I pass? Where did I go wrong? Where did I go wrong? Ruik Des checked it again and again, but still couldn't find out where he'd gone wrong. But just then, Qinzhao suddenly walked to Ruik Des' side. Before Ruik Des could react, Qinzhao suddenly reached out and pressed both palms on the obelisk. Since the problem-solving formula can't solve the problem must be this thing. Just destroy it. This obelisk has been blessed with indestructibility, and its main material is black mysterious gold. It's not. Before Ruik Des could finish, he suddenly saw Qinzhao's palms press down, and the obelisk started distorting. Watch me crush it! Qinzhao shouted. Cracks appeared on the obelisk. Ruik Des couldn't close his mouth. What was with this guy's power? How could he destroy black mysterious gold? The Wutai Mountain team and the alliance of 10,000 immortals were already used to this. After all, in Theodosius I's mausoleum, Chen Zhao had blown up the black-armored general with one punch. So, seeing Chen Zhao crush the obelisk made of black mysterious gold was nothing to be surprised about. Chapter 2250. In an instant, all the clay men lost their vitality and mobility. All the clay men were collapsing. The door that had been hidden behind the obelisk was finally revealed. Actually, from start to finish, you only need to destroy the obelisk to pass. Why do you have to follow the preset rules? Chen Zhao's words made Rooker speechless. Yes, it was indeed very simple. Just like what Chen Zhao had done, destroying the obelisk would solve all problems. But destroying the obelisk? If he could do it, there wouldn't be any more problems. At this moment, Rooker also understood. Whether it was Chen Zhao or Baifla, he hadn't seen them clearly. He couldn't see Chen Zhao and Baifla's true abilities. He couldn't see their identities or intentions. In Madhua Xinji's eyes, Chen Zhao's crushing of the obelisk was quite shocking. But it was different from Baifla's omnidirectional magic attacks. Baifla's magic was beautiful and shocking. It was as colorful as a rainbow and as frightening as the might of the heavens. In comparison, Chen Zhao wasn't as shocking. Chen Zhao's methods were too ordinary and mediocre before Baifla. But Rooker didn't think so. Black mystic gold was the hardest metal in the spiritual world. It was said to be able to block doomsday spells. It wasn't completely indestructible. But that required power that humans could never reach. But Chen Zhao could do it. It seemed like he hadn't used his full strength either. From this, it could be seen that Chen Zhao's abilities weren't much weaker than Baifla's. Both Chen Zhao and Baifla's methods were beyond his reach. Rooker couldn't reach them. Chen Zhao and Baifla didn't know what Rooker was thinking. They were more interested in the open door. But the door didn't seem to have any other reactions. What they'd been worried about and hopeful about didn't happen. The door was made of an unknown material. It was closed from front to back and didn't have any special magic waves. It stood there calmly and alone. No monsters came out of the door. Nothing. Just then, the ground started shaking. Did something break out of the seal? Chen Zhao was suddenly interested. No, this tremor is due to our battle. It has caused the geological structure of this place to change. This place is about to collapse, Baifla said. Or rather, do you feel something? I don't feel anything, but don't you think it's weird? When we were in Theodosius I's mausoleum, the ground also changed. It's the same this time. Of course, it's because of our battle, but don't you think it's too much of a coincidence that the same thing happened twice? Baifla thought about it and said, but I really didn't feel anything else. Forget it, maybe I'm really thinking too much. Chen Zhao easily gave up on pursuing the truth. Just like how he did things in the past, if it didn't concern him, he would let it go. Curiosity often leads to trouble, and trouble often leads to disaster. Where's the thing? Ruik Des asked. He wasn't here for a vacation, nor was he here to do good deeds with two unrelated teams. He had his own purpose, but he didn't find what he wanted. Moreover, the underground space of the sewers seemed to be very unstable, and there was a danger that it would collapse at any time. Mr. Ruik, let's go out quickly. This place is about to collapse. No, I want to find that thing. What do you want? Baifla asked. Ruik Des looked at Baifla, his eyes flickering. After a long hesitation, he said, the medicine of infinity. Pfft. What exactly are you trying to make? You actually need the medicine of infinity. What's the medicine of infinity? Chen Zhao asked curiously. Do you know about the catalyst? Yes. The concept of catalyst came from Chinese medicine. The so-called drug catalyst was actually when two medicinal herbs' medicinal properties were in conflict with each other. A third medicinal herb would be used to neutralize them. This would allow the two medicinal herbs' medicinal properties to perform their respective functions without causing the two medicinal properties to cancel each other out. However, There was a limit to the catalyst. Some herbs with too strong properties needed a special catalyst to neutralize them. You're saying that the medicine of infinity is the catalyst? Yes, and the medicine of infinity is said to be the catalyst for all medicines. You know a lot, Ruick Des said, annoyed. I don't have the medicine of infinity. Do you want it? You do? Ruick Des raised an eyebrow. The recipe for the medicine of infinity was lost hundreds of years ago. How do you have it? That's not your concern. You just need to answer me. Do you want it or not? What do you want? What do you have that can tempt me? Bifla asked back. Osta's treasure map in Greenland Island? I'm very rich. I don't need any treasures. Plus, Osta's treasure is actually a scam. The mystery of Louis XI's crown. There's no need. I know everything about Louis XII. I also know the secret hidden in that broken crown of his. That's the secret scepter of Pharaoh Khufu. No need. Ruick Des didn't give up. He kept proposing almost legendary things. But Bifla rejected them all. What exactly do you want? Ruick Des looked at Bifla and Qin Zhao warily. He was worried that they would ask for things he couldn't give, such as the Ring of Endless. And the medicine of infinity was something he really needed right now. If Bifla asked to trade the Ring of Endless for it, should he agree? The Ring of Restlessness was very important to him. It could even be said to be a symbol of his status. None of what you've said is enough to move me, Bifla said indifferently. Just say what you want. Don't beat around the bush. I don't know what I want either. Not long ago, I wanted to break through, but now I've broken through, so I don't know what I want. Bifla's smile made people feel uncomfortable. Ruick Des's expression kept changing. Bifla continued. Are you worried that you won't accept my suggestion to trade the Ring of Endless? Don't even think about it. I won't agree. The Ring of Endless that you treat like a treasure is meaningless to me. If I want to steal it, you won't be able to keep it. 9 Heavens Divine King. Chapter 2251. He didn't like Bifla's arrogance and disdain. But right now, he didn't want to have a conflict with Bifla. Plus, Qin Zhao, who wasn't weak either, was eyeing him. What exactly do you want? The books of your legacy system. Bifla finally revealed his intentions. Ruick Des's pupils dilated abruptly. After a while, he calmed down quietly. Sure, Ruick said. But it's only for borrowing. The two had reached a preliminary agreement. After we leave Desolate Town, I'll give you the medicine of infinity. Also, I have to collect other materials in Desolate Town, Ruick said. Hey, shouldn't we think about leaving? This place is really going to collapse soon. Rocks kept falling from above. All signs indicated that. All signs showed that this place could collapse at any time. Qin Zhao led the way out of the sewers. I really don't understand who built the sewers into a maze. It's so weird. In fact, although they'd come in through the sewers, the rest of the way was completely out of the sewers. However, Qin Zhao could just destroy some sections. After punching through the walls, they could still save a lot of time. After they left the sewers, the ground behind them sank with a rumble. But just then, Qin Zhao felt dense spiritual qi seeping out from the sunken ground. It was several times denser than the outside world. Celestial Master Zhang is coming this way, Bifla said. Huh! Qin Zhao tilted his head to the southwest. He could indeed feel 2 auras approaching. Qin Zhao couldn't tell who it was from the aura. But since Bifla said it was Zhang Tianyi, it must be him. Let's go, Qin Zhao said. I don't want to meet him. Bifla nodded and turned to Ruick. After the second trial, we'll trade outside Desolate Town. I hope you'll keep your promise. You too, Ruick Des replied coldly. Now the 2 auras were even closer. Even Ruick Des could feel the aura approaching. Mado, let's go. After calling out to Madhua Shinji, Ruick Des immediately turned around and left. Finally, only the Wutai Mountain team and the Union of 10,000 Immortals team were left. This time, they stayed in the sewers for almost 2 days. But the higher-ups didn't find anything. This made all of them quite discouraged. He hated Chen Zhao and Bifla even more. Huh! Zhang Tianyi suddenly stopped walking. What's wrong? Asked Wendy. We might be a step too late. Zhang Tianyi sensed a few auras that had already left before them. Two of them were familiar to him. They were Chen Zhao and Bifla. They parted in different directions. It seemed that they had purposely spread out to avoid facing him. If Zhang Tianyi wanted to chase after them, he could only choose one of them. One of them is Bifla. I feel that the spiritual energy of the world ahead has become denser. Does it have something to do with Bifla? It's most likely related to him, Zhang Tianyi said. Kelly and Evelyn had no idea what was happening. They silently followed behind Zhang Tianyi. Celestial Master Zhang, can you tell me what happened? As a normal person, it's hard for me to explain exactly what happened. Zhang Tianyi wasn't trying to avoid it. He really didn't know how to explain it. In the other direction of the wasteland market, a man wearing a hoodie was strolling on the empty road. He was walking in the direction where the spiritual energy had suddenly burst out. The second ancient seal. Is it open? Those guys are better than I thought. Just then, someone walked over. He was dressed exactly like the person, but he wasn't wearing a hat. When they saw each other, they were both stunned. Qin Zhao put his hands in his pockets and looked at the person before him. The person was also looking at Qin Zhao. The two stared at each other from a dozen meters away. Don't look for trouble. Don't look for trouble. Qin Zhao muttered to himself as he continued forward. But the person didn't hear Qin Zhao's muttering. I don't like people wearing the same clothes as me. I don't like it either, Qin Zhao said, shrugging. But it can't be helped. It's already happened. Just then, the person waved his scythe. I'll kill you. Qin Zhao moved and dodged the scythe flying in front of him. Don't be like that, okay? We just wore the same clothes. I told you I don't like it. There's no point in fighting like this, Qin Zhao said helplessly. Don't worry. You'll lose consciousness soon. I'm good at it. I'm good at killing too. The person suddenly turned ghostly. He waved the scythe in his hand and his figure flickered. His body also became incorporeal. The person waved the scythe and floated behind Qin Zhao. He slashed at the back of Qin Zhao's neck. Qin Zhao's figure sank and he dodged the attack by a hair's breadth. Huh! You can capture my figure? Your speed isn't very fast. Why do you think that my eyes can't capture your figure? You shouldn't be able to see me, the Grim Reaper, the person said. Grim Reaper? Qin Zhao suddenly realized that the scythe in Ruik's hand looked like Blackie's scythe. But the person was definitely alive. That was for sure. Qin Zhao didn't know that the person was the number one of the famous 10 villains' scythe. Of course, even if he knew, Qin Zhao wouldn't give him too much attention or respect. Scythe stared at Qin Zhao. Looks like I'll have to use some real skills to deal with you. Oh? Do you still have energy? I'm starting to look forward to your performance. Just looking forward to it. Arrogant guy, if you know my title, maybe you'll respect me a little more. Maybe you'll even be a little more afraid. Oh, are you famous in the spiritual world? I'm Scythe, one of the 10 villains, Scythe said coldly. I've never heard of it, but I think you've gained my respect. Qin Zhao had never heard of this title before. But judging from the person's tone, he should be famous. Qin Zhao was also very interested in the scythe in his hand. Qin Zhao wanted to know if the scythe and Blackie's scythe were the same thing. Or maybe they were just similar magic tools. Chapter 2252. Qin Zhao kept saying that he respected Scythe. But Scythe didn't feel any respect from Qin Zhao's words or attitude. That frivolous tone and casual gaze didn't seem to be respect for Scythe. Maybe he didn't even know him. Scythe was annoyed. Scythe's figure moved around like a ghost. Sometimes he appeared in front of Qin Zhao, and sometimes he flashed behind Qin Zhao. He waved the Grim Reaper's scythe in his hand lightly, tearing the air. It seemed like this could pressure Qin Zhao. Scratching his head, Qin Zhao said in distress, "Brother, you're making yourself look like a vengeful spirit. Do you think I'm a normal person? Can't we be more direct? You slash at me with the scythe and I nimbly dodge it. Then I turn around and punch you so hard that even your mother can't recognize you. What do you think?" Scythe's face darkened. He slashed at Qin Zhao's back without any care. This time, Qin Zhao didn't dodge. He let the Grim Reaper scythe hit him. Clang! The Grim Reaper scythe created sparks on Qin Zhao's body, but he was unharmed. Just as Scythe was panicking, Qin Zhao raised his fist and punched Scythe's face. But this punch had missed. More accurately, it went through Scythe's face. "Ha! Ha!" Qin Zhao and Scythe both retreated more than 10 meters. Both looked surprised. This feeling was the same as when he faced Blackie. There was no physical touch or spiritual feeling. Scythe was also surprised. The Grim Reaper's scythe didn't just target the body. It was a fatal threat to the soul too. But the Grim Reaper's scythe in his hand was useless against the man before him. "Are you surprised that your Grim Reaper's scythe is useless? The Grim Reaper is not a spiritual body, nor is it a physical body. Most people can't see the Grim Reaper because the Grim Reaper permanently exists in this world and other dimensions, so it can't be seen or touched. However, the Grim Reaper can attack the soul, and it can also attack the living. When attacking the soul, the Grim Reaper needs to transform itself into a spiritual body. When attacking the living, it needs to transform itself into a physical body. Do you understand? As long as you use physical attacks, it's useless against me. You can't beat me in close combat." Hearing that, Sickle's expression turned serious. The man in front of him knew more about the Grim Reaper's scythe than he did. This made him feel a sense of crisis. In the past, he had always been successful with the scythe of the Grim Reaper. No matter how much stronger the enemy was, they couldn't do anything to him. Because of the uniqueness of the Grim Reaper's scythe. When he used the Grim Reaper's scythe to transform into a Grim Reaper, no matter if it was a magical attack, a physical attack, or a spiritual attack, nothing posed a threat to him. But now, there was someone who knew his background. How could he calm down? The man in front of him must die. Scythe gripped the Grim Reaper scythe tightly. At this moment, a group of people appeared in the distance. Their leader was Nancy. Both she and her companions sensed the battle ahead. "What's with that eerie and terrifying aura? Scythe! It's a sickle!" Everyone's expression changed when they heard this name. Sickle! Even though there were 2 of the 10 evildoers among them, they were still in awe of the leader of the 10 evildoers. Smoke rose from the battlefield in front of them, and vengeful souls flew everywhere. It was as if that small area had completely turned into a ghost town. Scythe had already started to treat the enemy before him seriously. "1,000 souls end!" The sickle suddenly slashed at Qin Zhao. Instantly, it was as if 1,000 vengeful souls attacked at the same time. The air was filled with the cries of countless souls. Qin Zhao raised his fist and punched the Grim Reaper scythe away. Scythe's expression was serious. Qin Zhao's expression was also serious. This might be the weirdest reason for starting a war since he'd come into contact with the supernatural world. A murder caused by wearing the same clothes. Moreover, he could feel Scythe's murderous intent. He really wanted to fight to the death with him. Scythe sensed Qin Zhao's strength. He'd used the power of 1,000 souls, but he didn't gain any advantage. After a few rounds of attacks, the 1,000 vengeful souls attached to the sickle were all shattered. 10,000 souls burial! This time, Scythe used 10 times more power than before. A terrifying aura whizzed out of his body. Qin Zhao's heart jumped. Why did this sickle look so much like the Japanese samurai? From the way he attacked to the way he held the sickle, it was the same as the Japanese samurai. However, his appearance was that of a white man, not an Asian. In the distance, AI Nancy and the others couldn't see the intense battle ahead. The shockwaves spread in all directions. They didn't dare to get close in case they were affected. Scythe is fighting with the people above. Is it Celestial Master John? Or 23rd Blood Mary? AI Nancy looked at the two indistinct figures at the center of the battlefield from afar. They're really strong, AI Nancy said emotionally. Of course Scythe is strong and scary, but who's the other one? It's not Celestial Master Jean or 23rd Blood Mary. Most of them hadn't seen Celestial Master Jean or 23rd Blood Mary fight. But from the shockwaves of the battle ahead, it clearly wasn't the style of these two pillars of the supernatural world either. At the center of the battlefield, Qin Zhao was getting irritated. He couldn't catch Scythe. Scythe held the Grim Reaper scythe. If Qin Zhao wanted to catch Scythe, he had to materialize his body the moment he attacked. But Scythe was too fast and the time it took for him to materialize was too short. Unless Qin Zhao could grasp that hundredth of a second. Otherwise, all of Qin Zhao's attacks would be useless. But similarly, Scythe couldn't hurt Qin Zhao either. Whether it was 1,000-soul extermination or 10,000-soul burial, they were all 10 times more powerful, but they were still very weak against Qin Zhao. This guy was terrifyingly strong. Since when did someone like this appear in the supernatural world? Was the Eastern supernatural world really that strong? Any random one of them was at the monstrous level. Scythe gripped the Grim Reaper scythe even tighter. It seemed that normal moves wouldn't be able to defeat this guy. 100,000 torrent! Scythe growled. It was like Scythe was controlling an erupting river. 100,000 vengeful spirits swept toward Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao finally realized the problem. Scythe's previous 2 upgrades were all thanks to the vengeful spirits. Qin Zhao didn't find it strange at the time. After all, Scythe had the Grim Reaper scythe. But now that he used it, Qin Zhao felt that there was a huge problem. Chapter 2253. A Grim Reaper could only exist for about 500 years. For someone like Blackie, who was over 300 years old, he could only collect 10,000 to 20,000 souls. Most of the souls had already gone to where they were supposed to go. There were also some that he kept. Some were used as test subjects, while others were used as servants. He could only take out about 1,000 or 2,000 souls. If there was a Grim Reaper who had been collecting souls for 500 years without sending them to where they were supposed to go and kept them in his hands, he would probably be able to collect tens of thousands of souls. This was probably a relatively close value. Let's say that the person had obtained the Grim Reaper scythe by accident. When he obtained the scythe, he also obtained the souls of the scythe's original owner, which were probably in the tens of thousands. It would be abnormal if it was more than that. The Grim Reaper couldn't kill at will. For example, Blackie had evolved a few times, but he still followed the rules of the Soul Reapers and didn't dare to violate them. So Qin Zhao had reason to believe that the souls the person before him used weren't the scythe's previous owner's inheritance. They were obtained by killing. The person before him was an out-and-out butcher. So, Qin Zhao killed him to get rid of a scourge for the people. The Soul Reapers were called Grim Reapers mainly because their control and manipulation of souls had reached a level close to that of a god. Under the Grim Reaper scythe's control, the 100,000 vengeful spirits moved as if they were his arms. But even with the Grim Reaper scythe, he couldn't combine the 100,000 vengeful spirits into one. If he could, he might be able to hurt Qin Zhao. But just having them advance and retreat together was like splitting their power. The threat to Qin Zhao was negligible. In fact, it was pointless. The flying vengeful spirits had already blocked Qin Zhao's vision. But he could still sense the scythe's position. Qin Zhao didn't care about the vengeful spirits blocking his way. He slapped the scythe through the air. Suddenly, the scythe sensed something and immediately turned into the Grim Reaper. Instantly, a terrifying power passed through his body and landed not far behind him. Boom! Everything within a few hundred meters was flattened. Even the concrete on the ground was lifted up. Qin Zhao felt it was a pity. As expected, I shouldn't have hoped for such a long-range attack. But Scythe was swaying profusely. If that attack had landed on his body, he would probably have been smashed into pieces. It was too terrifying. This kind of attack was too terrifying. Moreover, from the looks of it, it didn't seem like he was using his full strength at all. It was more like a casual strike. This attack did not cause any damage to the scythe, but all the vengeful spirits blocking his way were killed by the attack. At the very least, thousands of vengeful spirits were destroyed. No, it was too dangerous to continue like this. Scythe thought of escaping. But after thinking about it, he felt that running away would not only damage his reputation. Moreover, he understood his own characteristics so well. Who knew if he would find a way to break his ability in the future? If I can't get rid of him today, in the future, he would definitely become a great threat to him. Finally, Scythe made up her mind. Since he couldn't get rid of him here, he would drag him into a different dimension. Scythe swung the death scythe at the empty air. Qin Zhao suddenly felt a chill on his back. When he turned around, he saw that there was a spatial rift behind him. Before Qin Zhao could react, the countless vengeful spirits in front of him launched their final attack. Countless vengeful spirits slammed into Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao understood that the scythe wanted to pull him into the different dimension. More accurately, it wanted to knock him in. If it was just these vengeful spirits, even if there were 10 times more of them, they still wouldn't be able to knock him into the rift. It was like a small stream that was flooded. No matter how fierce it was, it couldn't break a well-made dam. Right now, Qin Zhao was the dam that was blocking the path to forgiveness. However, Qin Zhao wanted to see how the alternate space behind the crack was different from the one Blackie had created. So, Qin Zhao moved his feet. The flood of vengeful spirits immediately rushed him into the rift. In the blink of an eye, Qin Zhao was on the other side of the rift. Scythe followed closely behind and entered this place. Welcome. You're the only living person who's come in here. Scythe floated high above Qin Zhao's head. In here, I'm the only god. In the sky behind Scythe, a huge patch of dark clouds covered the ground. It wasn't an ordinary dark cloud. It was a boundless terror formed by countless vengeful spirits. Even Qin Zhao couldn't help but gasp when he saw this. How many vengeful spirits are there? How many people have you killed? Qin Zhao thought that he'd killed countless people already. But after seeing the vengeful spirits here, he couldn't help but exclaim. Most of the vengeful spirits here were black. This meant that this person had committed mass murder in a certain part of Africa. Here you'll face me, who has the power of 1,000,000 souls, just like this. Scythe didn't even need to use the power of the Grim Reaper scythe here. He only needed to slap down from above. The dark clouds in the sky suddenly turned into a huge palm and smashed down at Qin Zhao's head. Qin Zhao looked up at the sky-high palm and also slapped up. The momentum of the world also turned into a huge palm and charged at the falling black palm. Rumble. Instantly, the sky changed color. Rumbles and shockwaves swept through every corner of this not-so-big space. Scythe's expression changed. How was this possible? He'd used the power of 2,000,000 vengeful spirits to activate that shocking attack. But this man didn't have anything to rely on. How could he use that attack? Since you know that I know about the Grim Reaper and the Grim Reaper scythe, you shouldn't have brought me here, Qin Zhao said, looking at Scythe. Here you don't have a third form. You can only be a spirit or a physical body, which happens to be the forms I like to face the most. If Scythe kept fighting Qin Zhao outside, he could use the Grim Reaper transformation to hide his body in an alternate space and avoid all of Scythe's attacks. But here, everyone was in an alternate space. This meant that Scythe's greatest advantage was gone. Scythe's expression changed, but he still pretended to be calm and said, But here, I have endless power. It's not endless. 2,000,000 vengeful spirits seems like a lot, but it's not inexhaustible. At least to me, this number isn't that despairing. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.